The paramedic asked who did this to me, expecting me to lie like always. But as the siren wailed, I remembered my stepfather's hand striking my face and my stepmother screaming that I was useless because I refused to buy their son a luxury car. My family did it. I whispered, for 27 years, I was the perfect daughter. But tonight, in the back of this speeding ambulance, I finally realized I was done being their bank account. My name is Fiona Perry, and the first thing I felt was the vibration of the road beneath my back before I even opened my eyes. Red and blue lights slashed across my vision, rhythmic and blinding, tearing through the sterile white interior of the ambulance. My ears were ringing, a high-pitched whine that sounded like a tea kettle left on a stove to scream until the water boiled away. I tried to lift my head, but the movement sent a spike of nausea rolling through my stomach. A hand, firm but gentle, pressed against my shoulder, holding me down. "Stay with us, honey. You took a nasty hit to the head." The voice belonged to a woman hovering above me. Her face was framed by the harsh halogen strips of the ambulance ceiling. She looked tired, with deep lines etched around her eyes, but there was a softness there that I was not used to seeing. She was checking my pupils with a penlight, her movements efficient and practiced. "Can you tell me your name?" she asked. My tongue felt like it was made of sandpaper. I had to swallow twice before I could make a sound. "Fiona," I croaked. "Fiona Perry." "Okay, Fiona. You are doing great. We are about 10 minutes out from Seattle Grace. Your vitals are stabilizing, but your blood pressure is a little high." She paused, her eyes locking onto mine with a seriousness that cut through the haze of my concussion. "I need to ask you something for the report. Fiona, and I need you to be honest with me. Who did this to you?" The question hung in the air between us, heavier than the smell of antiseptic and dried blood. Who did this? My instinct, honed over 27 years of walking on eggshells, was to lie. The script was already written in the back of my mind, printed in invisible ink by a lifetime of conditioning. I fell down the stairs. I tripped over the rug. I was clumsy. It was my fault. That was what I was supposed to say. That was the price of admission to the Perry family. Silence, protection, maintaining the picture-perfect facade of our life in Seattle Springs. But then the ambulance hit a pothole, and the jolt sent a fresh wave of throbbing pain through my temple. The agony was sharp, clarifying. It sliced through the fog of fear and obligation. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was not in the ambulance anymore. I was back in the living room. It was only an hour ago, but it felt like a lifetime. The memory played out in slow motion, distorted and vivid. The house had been perfect. It always was. My stepmother, Veronica, had spent 3 weeks planning this party for my stepbrother, Dylan. She had hired a catering crew that cost more than my rent for 6 months. Crystal glasses sparkled under the fairy lights she had insisted I string up in the backyard maples. The air smelled of expensive cologne and roasted lamb. Everyone was laughing. That was the thing about my family. They were experts at the performance of happiness. I remembered standing by the grand piano, holding a tray of empty champagne flutes I had been collecting because Veronica had fired the server halfway through the night for not smiling enough. I was wearing a dress Veronica had picked out for me, a drab gray thing that blended into the wallpaper. That was my role. I was the background texture, the useful prop. Then came the moment, the toast. My stepfather, Mark, had tapped his spoon against a glass, the sharp ting-ting-ting silencing the room. He stood in the center of the Persian rug, one arm draped around Dylan's shoulders. Dylan was 22 years old that day, grinning with that entitled smirk that always made him look like he knew a joke no one else heard. He was wearing a suit that cost $2,000. "We are so proud of the man you have become," Mark had boomed, his voice rich with fatherly pride. "And because you have worked so hard finishing your degree, your sister Fiona has a very special surprise for you." The room turned to me. Dozens of eyes, neighbors, business partners, friends of the family. They all looked at me with expectant smiles. My stomach dropped. We had not discussed this. I had bought him a watch, a nice watch. It cost me $500, which was a stretch, but I wanted to be kind. Veronica glided over to me, her perfume, heavy with gardenia, filling my nose. She pressed a small, heavy box into my hand. It was a key box. "Go on, Fiona," she whispered, her voice sweet as poison. "Give him the keys." I looked at the box. I looked at Mark. I looked at Dylan, who was practically vibrating with excitement. "Keys to what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The BMW. Silly," Veronica said, loud enough for the guests nearby to hear. She laughed. A tinkling, artificial sound. "The M3 he wanted. We told him his big sister was going to take care of it." My blood ran cold. An M3. That car cost nearly $80,000. I did not have $80,000. I had savings. Yes, my escape fund. Carefully hoarded from working double shifts and freelance writing gigs. But that was for my freedom, not for a car Dylan would crash in 3 months. I stammered, looking at the sea of expectant faces. "I didn't buy a car." The silence that followed was deafening. The smiles on the guests' faces faltered. Mark's smile didn't drop, but his eyes went dead. He walked over to me, leaning in close. "Don't be shy. Fiona, the down payment is fine. You can sign the financing papers tomorrow. Just give him the box." "No," I said. It was the first time I had ever said that word to them in public. It felt like vomiting a stone. "Excuse me?" Mark said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "I said no," I said, louder this time. My hands were shaking so hard the champagne glasses on the tray rattled. "I didn't buy him a car. I can't afford an $80,000 car. And even if I could, I wouldn't—" Veronica grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my flesh. "Stop this," she hissed. "You are embarrassing us. Give him the keys. We will discuss the money later." "No!" I pulled my arm away. The tray tipped. Crystal shattered on the hardwood floor. The sound was explosive. "You selfish little bitch," Dylan sneered. The charm was gone instantly, replaced by the petulant rage of a child denied a toy. "You promised." "I never promised anything," I shouted. "I didn't even know." Mark didn't hesitate. He didn't care about the guests anymore. His rage was a living thing. Faster than thought, he stepped forward and swung his hand. The slap didn't feel like a hand. It felt like a brick wrapped in velvet. It caught me square on the cheekbone, snapping my head back. The force of it sent me stumbling into the mantel. My head cracked against the marble edge. The world went white, then black, then red. I was on the floor. My ears were ringing. Through the haze, I heard Veronica screaming, not at Mark, at me. "Look what you did. You ruined everything. You are absolutely useless, useless." I looked up, vision swimming. Dylan was standing over me, looking down at my bleeding head. He wasn't horrified. He wasn't scared. He was annoyed. He kicked at a piece of broken glass near my face and muttered, "Great, now the party is over." Someone, a neighbor perhaps, had screamed, "Oh my God, she is bleeding. Call 911. Mark was adjusting his cufflinks, looking at me with pure disgust. "Get up. Fiona, stop being dramatic." But I couldn't get up. The darkness swarmed in, and the last thing I saw was the chandelier spinning above me, a kaleidoscope of fractured light. The memory receded, leaving me gasping for air in the ambulance. The paramedic was still watching me, waiting for an answer. I looked at her. I looked at the name tag pinned to her uniform. Sarah. If I lied now, I could go back. I could apologize. I could take out a loan with predatory interest rates. I could buy the car. I could smooth it over. I could be the good daughter again. I could be useful. But the word tasted like ash in my mouth. Useful. That was all I was to them. An asset. A resource to be mined until it was empty. I looked at the IV-line snake into my arm. I felt the throbbing in my skull. "My family did it," I whispered. The words were quiet, but they felt like thunder in the small space. Sarah blinked, leaning closer. "Honey, I need you to say that again. Who hit you?" I took a breath that rattled in my chest. "My stepfather, Mark Perry. He hit me because I wouldn't buy a BMW for my brother." Sarah's expression shifted from professional concern to horrified shock. She pulled back slightly, exchanging a look with the driver in the front cab. "Ideally, I should not be hearing this," she muttered, mostly to herself, before looking back at me with fierce intensity. "You are safe now. Fiona, we are going to get the police involved. That is assault." "They will say I fell," I said, tears finally leaking from the corners of my eyes. They were hot and stinging. "They are very good at lying." "It does not matter what they say," Sarah said firmly. She reached out and squeezed my hand. "We have physical evidence, and you have a voice. You just used it." She adjusted the blanket over me. "That is not how family treats family. Fiona, buying a luxury car? That is insane. Nobody does that. Nobody does that." The validation washed over me, cooler and more soothing than any medicine. For so long, they had made me believe that my reluctance was selfishness, that my desire to keep the money I earned was greed. They had warped my reality until up was down and abuse was love. I looked down at my wrist. There was a plastic hospital bracelet there. "Fiona Perry, DOB. May 12, 1997. Female." It was just standard procedure, a way to track a patient in the system. But to me, staring at it under the flickering lights, it looked like a declaration of independence. It was just my name. Not Mark's stepdaughter, not Dylan's sister, not Veronica's burden. Just Fiona. I closed my eyes again, but this time, I didn't see the party. I saw the future. It was a terrifying blank void. I had no home to go back to. My clothes were likely still in the closet of the guest room they graciously allowed me to occupy as long as I paid rent. My laptop, my journals, everything I owned was under their roof. But I wasn't there. I was here. I am not dying. I thought, the realization blooming in my chest like a strange flower. I am being born again. It was a violent birth, bloody and painful and screaming, but it was a birth nonetheless. The Fiona who existed to serve them died on that Persian rug when her head hit the marble. The woman in the ambulance was someone else, someone dangerous. The ambulance slowed, turning sharply. The siren cut out, replaced by the rumble of the engine as we backed into the bay. "We are here," Sarah said, unbuckling her harness. "Ready?" "Yes," I said, and I meant it. The doors flew open, admitting the cool night air of Seattle. It smelled of rain and exhaust fumes. I was pulled out, the gurney rattling over the pavement. Faces blurred past me. Doctors, nurses, security guards. I decided then and there, as the automatic doors of the emergency room slid open to swallow me, that I would never step foot in that house as a victim again. If I went back, it would be to burn it down, metaphorically, legally, financially. I didn't care how long it took. I didn't care what it cost. I had spent my life trying to buy their love. Now, I was going to make them pay for my pain. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. As they wheeled me into a trauma bay, a thought drifted through my mind, unbidden. I thought about my grandmother, Helena, my father's mother, the only person in the family who refused to speak to Mark or Veronica. She lived alone in a small house on the edge of town, surrounded by cats and books. Everyone said she was senile. Everyone said she was crazy. But the last time I saw her, she had gripped my hand with surprising strength and looked at me with eyes that were sharp as tack. "One day, girl," she had rasped, "one day you will have had enough, and when that day comes, you come to me." I hadn't understood her then. I thought she was just rambling. But as the doctor shone a bright light into my eyes and asked me to count backwards from 10, I realized she had known. She had seen this coming. I thought this was the end of my life. I thought I had lost everything. But my grandmother was preparing to open a safe, to understand how I ended up bleeding in the back of an ambulance at 27. You have to understand the silence of the house I grew up in. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a room where everyone is holding their breath, waiting for someone else to mess up. And in the Perry household, that someone was always expected to be me. We lived in Seattle Springs, a town that looked like it had been generated by an algorithm for the American dream. The lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives. The fences were white and perpetually freshly painted, and the driveways were filled with SUVs that never saw a speck of mud. It was a place where appearance was the only currency that mattered. If your grass was brown, you were failing. If your child wasn't on the honor roll, you were failing. And if your family wasn't a cohesive, smiling unit, you were a pariah. My biological mother died when I was 6 years old. I do not have many clear memories of her. Just a lingering sense of warmth and the smell of lavender laundry detergent. When she left, she took all the color in my world with her, my father. A man who was better at balancing spreadsheets than handling grief. Did not know what to do with a daughter who looked exactly like the wife he had lost. So, he did what many men in Seattle Springs did. He found a replacement. Enter Veronica. Veronica was perfect. She had blonde hair that never moved in the wind, a voice that sounded like tinkling bells, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was the lead actress in the play of our lives, and she played the role of devoted mother with terrifying precision. She came as a package deal with her son, Dylan, and later, after my father faded into the background of his own life, eventually passing away from a heart attack that everyone said was due to stress, but I knew was due to a broken heart. Veronica remarried Mark. That was how the hierarchy was solidified. Mark became the authority, Veronica the director, Dylan the star, and I became the stagehand. The first time I realized I did not actually belong in this family was during the official portrait session shortly after Mark and Veronica solidified their union. I was 8 years old. We were in a studio downtown, dressed in matching navy blue and cream outfits. Veronica was fussing over Dylan's collar. Dylan was 6 then, a cherubic boy with cheeks that begged to be pinched. He was glowing. He always glowed, because he had never known a day without adoration. The photographer, a harried man with sweat stains under his arms, was trying to arrange us. Mark sat in the center on a velvet stool, looking regal. Veronica stood behind him, her hand resting possessively on his shoulder. She pulled Dylan in front of Mark, between his knees, creating a tight, triangular unit of affection. And then there was me. I stood to the side, unsure of where to put my hands. The photographer looked at me, then at the group, then back at me. "Honey, just take a half step to the left," he said, waving his hand vaguely. I moved left. "No, other left, away from the center. We need to balance the negative space." I moved further away. By the time the shutter clicked, there was a palpable gap between my shoulder and Veronica's arm, in the final print, which hung in the hallway for 15 years. You could see it clearly. They were a family. I was a bystander who had wandered into the frame. I remember staring at that photo for hours, wondering if the gap was physical or if it was just the shape of my soul. Veronica never saw the gap, or if she did, she liked it. She would stand in front of that picture with guests and point to Dylan. "Look at him," she would coo, her voice dripping with pride. "He is so radiant. He just commands the room, doesn't he?" Then the guest would look at me, standing awkwardly in the corner of the hallway, and ask, "And how is Fiona?" Veronica's face would settle into a mask of polite indifference. "Oh, Fiona. She is very good. Such a good girl. Very obedient." That was the difference. Dylan was radiant. I was obedient. Dylan was a person. I was a function. Mark, my stepfather, was less subtle. He was a man who believed in return on investment. To him, children were stocks. You poured money and attention into the ones that showed high-yield potential. Dylan, with his charm and his athletic ability, was a blue-chip stock. I was a safe, low-yield bond. "Fiona is an old soul," Mark would say, waving his hand dismissively when neighbors asked why I wasn't in the youth soccer league or the drama club. "She is practically a grown-up already. She doesn't need all that coddling. She prefers to be helpful." He made my neglect sound like a virtue. He framed my servitude as maturity. By the time I was 10 years old, I knew how to separate whites from colors, how to iron a dress shirt so the pleats were razor sharp, and how to roast a chicken with rosemary and lemon. These were not chores I did for allowance. These were the rent I paid for existing. I remember a Tuesday in November. It was raining. The relentless Seattle drizzle that soaks into your bones. I came home from school, my backpack heavy with textbooks, and found the kitchen in chaos. Veronica was sitting at the island, sipping a glass of Chardonnay, while Dylan was on the floor building a Lego castle that spanned the entire width of the room. "Oh, good, you are home," Veronica said, not looking up from her magazine. "The cleaning lady called in sick. I need you to vacuum the living room and start dinner. Mark wants meatloaf." "But I have a math test tomorrow," I said, my voice small. "I need to study." Veronica finally looked at me. Her eyes were ice blue, devoid of warmth. "Fiona, family is about sacrifice. We all do our part. Dylan has had a long day at karate practice. He is exhausted. You can study after you clean." I looked at Dylan. He didn't look exhausted. He looked focused, happy, placing a plastic brick on his tower. "Why can't Dylan help?" I asked. It was a dangerous question. Veronica sighed, the sound of a martyr being persecuted. "Dylan is a boy. Fiona, he needs to focus on his development. He is going to be a leader one day. You? You are learning how to care for a home. That is a skill you will actually use." The implication was clear. Dylan is destined for greatness. You are destined for service. I vacuumed the living room. I made the meatloaf. I studied for my math test at 1 o'clock in the morning with a flashlight under my covers so Mark wouldn't yell about the electricity bill. I got an A on the test. When I brought it home, Mark glanced at it and nodded. "Good, that is what we expect." The next week, Dylan drew a stick figure picture of a dog. It was terrible. The legs were uneven, and the head looked like a potato. Veronica framed it. She literally bought a gold frame and hung it in the kitchen. "He has such a unique perspective," she exclaimed to anyone who would listen. "Look at the raw energy in the lines." I learned then that my achievements were the baseline, while Dylan's mediocrity was a miracle. The most painful memory, the one that truly cemented my place in the hierarchy, happened when I was 12. I had discovered art, specifically watercolors. I found an old set in the garage and started painting in the margins of my notebooks. For the first time, I felt like I had a voice. I could express the gray sadness of the rain, the lonely gap in the family photo, the vibrant anger I wasn't allowed to speak. I found a flyer for an art class at the community center. It cost $150 for 8 weeks. I saved my lunch money for 3 months. I collected cans from the neighbors' recycling bins before the truck came. I scrounged coins from the sofa cushions. When I had the money, I brought it to Veronica. I didn't ask her to pay for it. I just needed her to sign the permission slip and drive me there on Thursday evenings. "I saved the money myself," I said, holding out the crumpled bills and the jar of quarters. I was so proud. I thought, surely, this undeniable proof of my dedication would move her. Veronica looked at the money, then at the flyer. She didn't smile. She frowned. "Thursday evenings?" she asked. "Yes, from 6 to 8. "That is when Dylan has his private tutoring," she said. "I can't drive you. I have to drive him." "I can walk," I pleaded. "It is only 2 miles. "And have the neighbors see you walking in the rain like a vagrant?" Mark chimed in. Walking into the kitchen, he picked up the flyer. "Art class? What is the point of this, Fiona?" I like it," I stammered. "I think I'm good at it." Mark laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Art is a hobby for rich people. Fiona, we need to be practical. Dylan needs that tutoring. His grades are slipping, and we need to get him into a good prep school." He looked at the pile of money on the counter. $150. "Actually," Mark said, scooping up the bills, "this is perfect. Dylan needs a new graphing calculator for his math class. The one the school recommends is exactly around this price." I felt the air leave the room. "No," I whispered. "That is my money. I saved it. And where did you get it? Veronica asked sharply. From our house? From the food we buy you? From the allowance we don't charge you for rent? Technically, Mark said, shoving the money into his pocket. Everything under this roof belongs to the household. We are a team. Fiona, you should be happy to help your brother succeed. He is the one who needs development right now. You are doing fine. But it is unfair, I shouted. My voice cracked. Tears welled up in my eyes, hot and stinging. Veronica's face hardened instantly. If there was one thing she hated more than dirt, it was my emotions. Stop it, she hissed. Stop those crocodile tears right now. You are ugly when you cry. Fiona, look at your face, all blotchy and red. Nobody wants to look at that. I swallowed the sob. I forced it down my throat, feeling it burn like acid. I had learned early on that my pain was an inconvenience to them. My tears were not a signal for comfort. They were an annoyance, like a dripping faucet that needed to be tightened. Go to your room, Mark said, turning his back on me, and wash your face. We have guests coming for dinner, and I don't want you looking like a victim. I went to my room. I didn't cry. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall. I thought about the money in Mark's pocket. I thought about the calculator Dylan would probably lose or break within a week. That night, during dinner, the guests praised Dylan for his commitment to academic excellence because he had a new high-tech calculator. Dylan beamed, soaking up the praise like a sponge. And Fiona? One of the guests asked, looking at me as I cleared the plates. What are you up to? Fiona is our little helper, Veronica said, reaching out to pat my arm. Her nails dug slightly into my skin. She sacrificed her little hobby money to help her brother get his school supplies. Isn't that right, sweetie? She knows the value of family. Wow, the guest said, nodding approvingly. That is so noble. You are raising a saint. I looked at them. I looked at the smiles, the wine glasses, the warm glow of the chandelier. I wasn't a saint. I was a resource. I was a battery they were draining to power Dylan's bright future. I went back to the kitchen to wash the dishes. As I scrubbed the grease off the roasting pan, watching the dirty water swirl down the drain, a thought occurred to me. It was a quiet, terrifying thought that would haunt me for the rest of my adolescence. I looked at my reflection in the dark window above the sink. I saw a girl with hollow eyes and a mouth set in a grim line. If I disappeared, I thought, if I just dissolved into this soapy water and washed away, would anyone actually notice? They would notice the dishes weren't done. They would notice the laundry was piling up. They would notice the house was dusty. But would they notice me? I dried my hands on a towel. I could hear laughter coming from the dining room. Dylan was telling a joke. Mark was laughing his booming laugh. Veronica was tinkling her bell-like giggle. They were complete without me. In fact, they were better. I wasn't a member of the family. I was the support staff that made their performance possible. I put the pan away and turned off the light. In the darkness of the kitchen, I felt a strange, cold resolve settle in my chest. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was the numbness of a limb that has been asleep for too long. I didn't know it then, but that was the night I stopped being a child. I started being an observer. I started keeping score. And I started waiting for the day when the bill would finally come due. By the time I turned 15, I realized that freedom in America had a very specific smell. It smelled like roasted coffee beans and old paper. I found a job at Paper Moon, a small, independent bookstore and cafe on the edge of town that was perpetually dusty and blissfully quiet. It was the only place in Seattle Springs where nobody cared about the Perry family reputation, to Darla, the owner with bright purple streaks in her gray hair. I was not the invisible stepdaughter or the charity case. I was just Fiona. I was the girl who could carry 3 steaming lattes without spilling a drop, and who knew exactly where to shelve the misplaced romance novels. For the first time in my life, I had something that was mine. My starting wage was $7.25 an hour, every 2 weeks. When Darla handed me that paycheck, I felt a rush of adrenaline that was almost dizzying. It was not a lot of money. In fact, by Seattle Springs standards, it was poverty wages. But to me, it was power. It was a tangible proof that my time and effort had value, a concept that was entirely foreign inside my own home. I made a plan, a secret, desperate plan. If I saved every single penny, if I never bought a coffee for myself, if I walked to work instead of taking the bus, I could save enough to move out the day I turned 18. I calculated it in my head constantly. 3 years, thousands of hours of scrubbing tables and stocking shelves. It was a mountain to climb, but I was ready to climb it barefoot if I had to. But I made a rookie mistake. I underestimated the surveillance state I lived in. I had been stashing my cash tips in an envelope taped to the underside of my bottom dresser drawer. It was a cliché hiding spot, I know, but I was 15, and I thought my room was my private space. I came home one Tuesday afternoon, smelling like espresso and feeling tired but accomplished. I went straight to my room to deposit the $12 I had made in tips that day. I pulled the drawer out. I reached underneath. The tape was there. The envelope was gone. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. I tore the room apart. I checked under the mattress, inside my pillowcases, behind the books on my shelf. Nothing. $340. That was 4 months of work. Gone. I ran downstairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. I found Mark in the living room, watching a golf tournament on the 60-inch television. He was eating a sandwich, relaxed, unbothered. "Mark," I said, my voice trembling. "Someone went into my room. My money is gone." He did not look away from the screen. He took a slow bite of his sandwich, chewed, and swallowed. "Oh, that," he said casually. "I borrowed it." I froze. "You what?" "I was a little short for the landscapers this morning," he said, finally glancing at me with a look of mild annoyance, as if I were interrupting something important. "I knew you had that little stash upstairs. I figured you would want to help out." "Help out?" I choked out. "That was my savings. I worked for that." "And who pays for the roof over your head? Fiona?" Mark asked. His voice was calm, reasonable, the voice of a man explaining simple physics to a toddler. "Who pays for the electricity you use? The water you shower with? The food in the fridge?" "That is different," I argued, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "You are the parent. That is what parents do. That money was mine." Mark muted the television. He turned fully toward me, his face hardening. The casual mask slipped, revealing the cold entitlement underneath. "Let's get one thing straight," he said. "In this house, we are a team. There is no mine and yours when the family needs something. We are raising you. We are feeding you. The least you can do is contribute without making a scene. Do not be selfish. Fiona, it is unbecoming." "When will you pay me back?" I asked. I knew the answer before I asked it. Mark laughed. "Pay you back? Consider it rent, kiddo. Now move. You are blocking the screen." I stood there for a moment, feeling the theft settle into my bones. It was not just about the money. It was about the violation. He had gone through my things. He had taken what I earned, and he had twisted reality so that I was the ungrateful one for wanting it back. From that day on, the dynamic shifted. They smelled blood. They realized that I was a resource that could be tapped. Veronica was the master of the emotional shakedown. She did not take money from my room. She took it from my soul. "Family is sacrifice," she would say, usually while looking at a catalog for expensive home decor or planning Dylan's next venture. It was her favorite weapon, a phrase she wielded like a cudgel. Dylan was 13 then, and he was beginning to morph into a clone of Mark. He wanted things constantly, expensive things that signaled status. "Mom, everyone has the new Jordans," he whined one evening at dinner. "The red and black ones. I look like a loser in these old Nikes." His old Nikes were 3 months old. "Well, they are $200, honey," Veronica said, looking distressed. "Budget is a little tight this month with the country club dues." Then, her eyes slid over to me. I was eating my peas, trying to be invisible. Fiona has been picking up extra shifts at that coffee shop, Veronica said softly. Haven't you, Fiona? I looked up, a piece of bread halfway to my mouth. I am saving for college, I said defensively. College is years away, Veronica said with a dismissive wave of her hand. Your brother is suffering now. He is being bullied for his shoes. Surely you can help him. You want him to be happy, don't you? I need my money, I said. God, you are so stingy, Dylan sneered. He stabbed his steak with aggressive force. You act like you are poor or something. It is just shoes. Why do you hate me? I don't hate you, I said. I just work hard for my money. And we work hard to give you a life, Veronica snapped, her voice rising. We took you in when your mother died. We gave you a home, and you can't even chip in a few dollars to buy your brother a pair of shoes so he can fit in? I thought I raised you better than that. Fiona, I thought you were part of this family. The guilt was heavy and suffocating. It was a trap. If I said no, I was the villain who hated her orphan brother. If I said yes, I was the fool who got robbed. I eventually caved. I always caved. I bought the shoes. Dylan wore them for 2 weeks before he scuffed them and threw them in the back of his closet. Forgotten. I stared at those abandoned shoes and saw 2 weeks of my life, scrubbing floors and serving coffee, rotting in the dark. But the breaking point, the moment the crack in my heart turned into a chasm, came the summer I turned 16. I had applied for a scholarship to the Pacific Northwest Young Writers Retreat. It was a prestigious 2-week program on an island off the coast. It was my dream. I had spent weeks polishing my submission essay, writing it late at night in the bathroom so the light wouldn't wake anyone up. When the letter came, I didn't open it in the kitchen. I took it to Paper Moon. I sat in the back room, my hands shaking, and tore the envelope open. Accepted. Full tuition scholarship. I cried. I actually cried tears of joy into my apron. For the first time, someone saw potential in me that had nothing to do with how well I cleaned a kitchen. I went home that night feeling 10 feet tall. I thought, maybe, just maybe, this would be the thing that made them proud. It was a scholarship. It was free. It was prestigious. I waited until dessert to tell them. I got into the writer's retreat, I said, placing the letter on the table. I got a full scholarship. Mark picked up the letter. He scanned it. Grease from his pork chop leaving a smear on the paper. Writing? He said, dropping the letter back onto the table as if it were a piece of junk mail. That is cute, Fiona. But what is the point? The point is, it is a great program, I said, my smile faltering. It is for talented young writers. I just need a ride to the ferry terminal and maybe a little money for the supply list. When is it? Veronica asked. July 10th to July 24th. Veronica's face fell, not in sadness, but in annoyance. Oh, Fiona, that is impossible. Why? I asked. It is free. I just need... That is the same time as Dylan's football camp, Veronica said. The elite quarterback academy. We have to drive him to Oregon. We are going to make a family trip out of it. We can't be in 2 places at once. I can take the bus to the ferry, I said quickly. I don't need you to drive me. I can figure it out. And who is going to watch the house? Mark asked. We are all going to Oregon. We need someone here to water the plants, feed the dog, bring in the mail. We can't leave the house empty for 2 weeks. It is a security risk. I stared at them. You want me to stay home to water the plants, instead of going to this retreat? It is not just the plants, Veronica said, her voice taking on that familiar, reasonable tone that made me want to scream. Look, Fiona, let's be realistic. Writing is a hobby. It is a daydream. Dylan's football camp? That is a pathway to a college scholarship. That is a real future. We have to prioritize the investments that make sense. But I got a scholarship, I whispered. I earned this. And you are being incredibly selfish to expect us to rearrange our entire lives so you can go write poems in the woods, Mark said harshly. Dylan is the future of this family. He has actual talent that can pay bills someday. Writing doesn't pay bills. Fiona, You need to stop having your head in the clouds and start thinking about your duties here. Besides, Dylan added, grinning around a mouthful of dessert, who is going to wash my practice jersey if you are gone? He laughed. Mark laughed. Veronica smiled that tight, indulgent smile. I looked at the letter on the table. The grease stain had soaked through the word, "Congratulations." "You are right," I said. My voice sounded dead to my own ears. "I shouldn't have asked." "Good girl," Mark said. "Glad you are seeing sense." I didn't go to the retreat. I stayed home. I watered the begonias. I fed the dog. I walked through the empty, silent house that felt like a mausoleum. But something changed in me during those 2 weeks. I stopped keeping my money in my room. At Paper Moon, Darla had started noticing things. She noticed the way I flinched when the phone rang and the caller ID showed my home number. She noticed the dark circles under my eyes. She noticed that I never bought lunch, eating only the stale pastries that were destined for the trash. One afternoon, she found me in the back room, counting my tips with frantic intensity. "You okay, kid?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. "I am fine," I said quickly, shoving the money into my pocket. Darla chewed her gum thoughtfully. "You know," she said, "if you ever need a place to keep things safe, things you don't want borrowed, there is a loose floorboard under the register counter, or, the safe in the back office has plenty of room." I looked at her. Her eyes were kind, but sharp. She knew. She didn't ask, but she knew. "Thank you," I said. From then on, my money never went home. I hid bills inside hollowed-out encyclopedias on the giveaway shelf. I taped 20s inside empty tampon boxes in the staff bathroom, knowing Mark and Dylan would never touch them. I opened a secret savings account at a bank 3 towns over, walking 6 miles on my day off to make the deposit so no statement would ever come to the house. I became a spy in my own life. At home, I played the role they wanted. I cooked, I cleaned, I nodded when Veronica talked about sacrifice. I smiled when Dylan treated me like a waitress, snapping his fingers for a refill of his soda while he played video games. "Hey, Fiona, get me some chips," he would say, not even looking at me. "Sure, Dylan," I would say, "and make it quick. I am in a ranked match." I watched him. I watched the way he sat on the couch like a king, surrounded by the spoils of a war he never had to fight. He had the best clothes, the best gadgets, the best of everything, and he had absolutely no idea what any of it cost. He thought the world was a vending machine that just dispensed rewards because he existed. I looked at Mark and Veronica, fawning over him, feeding the monster they were creating. They thought they were building a dynasty. They didn't realize they were building a parasite. I began to understand the transaction clearly. My value to them was purely logistical. I was an asset column on Mark's mental spreadsheet. Cost of maintenance, low. Output, high. Compliance, excellent. No, I thought one night as I scrubbed the toilets while they slept. Not anymore. My self-esteem was worn thin, like fabric scrubbed too hard against a rock. I felt small. I felt used. There were days I looked in the mirror and hated the girl staring back at me for being so weak, for being so unable to say no. But beneath the exhaustion, beneath the shame, something else was growing. It wasn't hope. Hope was too fragile. It was something harder. It was the cold, compressed rage of a person who realizes that no one is coming to save them. I stopped crying over the missed art classes and the stolen scholarships. I stopped wishing Veronica would love me. I stopped wishing Mark would respect me. I started counting. I counted the dollars in my secret account. I counted the days until I turned 18. I counted every insult, every stolen bill, every demand. They thought they were breaking me. They thought they were molding me into the perfect, submissive servant who would support Dylan forever. They were wrong. They were just fueling the fire that would eventually burn their perfect little house to the ground. "Just wait," I whispered to the reflection in the mirror. "Just wait." If the Perry household was a stage where everyone was performing a script written by my stepmother, My grandmother's house was the backstage dressing room where the lights were dim, and you could finally take off the uncomfortable costume. Helena Perry, my father's mother, lived in a small, weather-beaten bungalow on the south side of Seattle Springs. It was the part of town where the lawns were a little overgrown and the fences leaned slightly to the left, as if tired of standing up straight. Her house smelled of peppermint tea, old cedar wood, and the peculiar, comforting dust of history. It was the only place in the world where my shoulders dropped away from my ears. Mark called her eccentric, Veronica called her difficult, Dylan called her the old witch, though never to her face because Helena had a way of looking at you that made you feel like she could see your browser history. To me, she was simply the only person who ever looked me in the eye. I would ride my bicycle over to her house on Sunday afternoons. Ostensibly, it was to help her with her correspondence. Her arthritis was getting worse, or so she claimed, and she needed someone to write out her checks for the utility bills and read the fine print on her bank statements. But I knew it was an excuse. We would sit at her small kitchen table, which was covered in a lace tablecloth that had yellowed with age. She would pour me tea in a chipped porcelain cup, never a mug, always a cup with a saucer, and push a plate of store-bought ginger cookies toward me. "So," she would say, her voice raspy like dry leaves, "are you happy, Fiona?" It was such a jarring question. At home, the questions were always functional. Is the dishwasher running? Did you pick up Dylan's dry cleaning? Did you mail the RSVP for the gala? But Helena asked about happiness as if it were a vital sign, like a pulse or blood pressure. "I am fine, Grandma," I would usually say, looking down at my tea. "I did not ask if you were fine," she would snap gently. "I asked if you were happy. There is a canyon of difference between the two. Child, fine is what you say when you are surviving. Happy is what you say when you are living." She saw everything. She saw the way I flinched when a car door slammed too loud outside. She saw the fraying cuffs of my jeans, because Veronica refused to buy me new clothes while Dylan got a new wardrobe every season. She saw the way I hoarded the ginger cookies, eating them slowly to make them last, because food was sometimes a negotiation at home. One rainy afternoon, when I was 17, I was helping her sort through a stack of old letters. I found a photograph of my father tucked inside an envelope. He was young, laughing, holding a fishing rod. "He was a good man," Helena said, watching me stare at the photo. "But he was weak. He let grief hollow him out, and he let that woman fill the empty space with plastic and venom." She never used Veronica's name. It was always that woman. "They take good care of me." I lied. It was the reflex again. Protect the family image. Helena snorted. She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was paper-thin, cool and dry, but her grip was surprisingly strong. "You are a terrible liar, Fiona," she said. "You get that from your grandfather. Listen to me. You are enduring. That is noble, I suppose. But you cannot endure forever. A bridge can only hold so much weight before it snaps. And when it does, you need to make sure you are not the one falling into the river." I didn't know what she meant then. I just squeezed her hand back and went back to writing a check for the electric company for $42.15. Then came my 18th birthday. In the Perry house, birthdays were political events. Dylan's birthday was a national holiday, requiring months of planning and thousands of dollars. My birthday was usually acknowledged with a card signed by Veronica, Mark couldn't be bothered, and a practical gift, like a new vacuum cleaner attachment or a gift card to the grocery store so I could buy the ingredients for my own cake. On the morning I turned 18, the house was quiet. Mark had already left for the office. Veronica was at yoga. Dylan was asleep. I went to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. I wasn't expecting anything. Maybe a coupon from the pizza place that offered a free soda on your birthday. There was a thick, cream-colored envelope sitting on top of the pile. It was heavy. The return address was embossed in black ink. Harper and Green, attorneys at law. My heart did a strange flutter in my chest. I had never received mail from a lawyer before. Was I being sued? Had I done something wrong? I stood in the driveway, the gray Seattle sky threatening rain, and tore open the seal. Inside was a stack of documents and a letter on thick, watermarked paper. Dear Ms. Perry, we are writing to inform you that as of this date, May 12, 2015, the trust fund established in your name by Mrs. Helena Perry has matured and is now under your sole control. I blinked. I read the sentence again. Trust fund? I scanned down the page, looking for numbers. My eyes found the balance line. Current value, $150,000.00. I stopped breathing. The world tilted on its axis. The gray sky seemed to shatter into a million pieces of light. $150,000. It was an impossible number. It was more money than I had ever imagined seeing in one place. It was freedom. It was college tuition. It was an apartment. It was a car that didn't break down. It was a ticket out of Seattle Springs. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the papers. Tucked behind the formal legal letter was a smaller note, written on blue stationery in shaky, familiar handwriting. My dearest Fiona, I have been saving this since the day you were born. Your father added to it before he passed, though he was too afraid to tell his wife. I have watched you give away pieces of yourself for years to people who do not know your worth. You have given too much. This is what the world owes you. It is not for the family. It is for you. Do not let them take it. Love, Grandma. I stood there, clutching the paper to my chest, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't just the money. It was the fact that she had seen me. She had known I would need an escape hatch. She had been plotting my freedom while I was busy despairing. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and walked back toward the house. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was walking on solid ground. I had a secret. I had power. But I had forgotten rule number 1 of the Perry household. Nothing is private. When I walked into the kitchen, Mark was home. He must have come back for lunch. He was standing at the kitchen island, holding a piece of paper. Veronica was standing next to him, looking at the paper with a hungry, calculating expression. My stomach dropped. I looked at the mail in my hand, then at the paper in Mark's hand. We got a courtesy copy, Mark said. Looking up, he didn't say happy birthday. He didn't say congratulations. He looked at me like I was a slot machine that had just paid out. From Old Man Harper. He is the executor of your grandmother's estate planning. He sent over the notification. $150,000, Veronica breathed. She looked at me, and for the first time in years, her eyes were actually bright. Fiona, this is incredible. It is a lot of money, I said, clutching my envelope tighter. I didn't know. Well, obviously Helena was hoarding it, Mark said, shaking his head with a scoff. Living in that shack, crying poverty, all while sitting on a pile of cash. Typical. He walked around the island, approaching me with a stride that was too confident, too claiming. But this is great timing, Mark continued, clapping his hands together. The market is volatile right now, but I have some opportunities in emerging tech that are showing 40% returns. We can take this capital, put it into the family portfolio, and by the time you actually need it, we could double it. Double it? I repeated. Exactly, Veronica chimed in. She poured a glass of water, her movements fluid and casual. And of course, we have Dylan's tuition coming up for the fall semester. We were going to have to liquidate some bonds, which would have a tax penalty, but we can use this as a bridge loan, interest-free, obviously, since it is family money. I took a step back. The walls of the kitchen felt like they were closing in. Family money? I said. My voice was quiet. Of course, Veronica said, smiling that plastic smile. Fiona, honey, you are 18. You don't know how to manage that kind of wealth. You would just blow it on, I don't know, clothes or silly trips. Mark is a finance professional. He knows how to handle this. We will put it in the main account, and we will give you a monthly allowance. It will be much safer. They weren't asking. They were informing me. They had already spent it in their heads. They had already absorbed my lifeline into their insatiable machine. Dylan needs a new car, too, Mark mused, almost to himself. If we are going to send him to a top-tier business school, he needs to look the part, We can allocate $20,000 for a vehicle." "No," I said. Mark stopped. He looked at me, blinking slowly. "Excuse me?" "It is not family money," I said. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. But I remembered the note in my hand. "Do not let them take it. It is my trust fund. It is in my name. Grandma left it to me." The air in the kitchen turned instantly cold. Veronica's smile vanished. "Fiona," she said, her voice dropping to that dangerous, disappointed register. "Don't be greedy. We have raised you. We have fed you. We have clothed you. Do you have any idea how much you have cost us over the last 12 years? And now, when you finally have a chance to contribute, to pay us back for our generosity, you want to hoard it?" "It is for my college," I said, my voice trembling. "I want to go to university." "University?" Mark laughed. "We already discussed this. You can go to community college here in town. It is affordable. We are not wasting Ivy League money on a liberal arts degree for you. Dylan is the one going to business school. That is the investment that pays off." "Give me the papers." "Fiona," Mark said, holding out his hand. It was a command. "I will call Harper and get the transfer authorization started. We can have the funds moved by Monday." I looked at his hand. It was broad, manicured, demanding. I looked at Veronica, her face a mask of expectant entitlement. I thought about the $150,000. I thought about the freedom. I need to think about it," I stammered. Mark's eyes narrowed. "There is nothing to think about, unless you don't trust us, unless you think you are better than this family." "I just want to read the documents," I said, backing away toward the hallway. I will talk to you later." I turned and ran. I actually ran up the stairs, clutching the envelope, while Mark called out my name in a voice that sounded like a thunderclap. I locked my bedroom door. I dragged my desk chair under the handle. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial the phone. I pulled out the cheap burner phone I had bought with my tips, the one they didn't know about, and dialed the number I knew by heart. It rang 3 times. "Hello?" "Grandma," I whispered. I was crying again. "They know. They got a copy. Mark wants to invest it. Veronica wants to use it for Dylan's tuition. They said I am greedy. They said I owe them." There was a silence on the other end of the line, a long, heavy silence. Then, I heard the sound of a match being struck, followed by a slow exhale. Helena didn't smoke, but she lit candles when she was thinking. "I knew they would," Helena said. Her voice was not surprised. It was grim. It was the voice of a general who sees the enemy troops cresting the hill. "What do I do?" I sobbed. "They are going to make me sign it over. They are going to guilt me until I break. Mark he looked scary. Grandma." "Listen to me, Fiona," Helena said. Her voice was low and steely, cutting through my panic. "You do not sign anything, not a single piece of paper. If Mark puts a pen in your hand, you drop it. If they scream, you let them scream. If they threaten to kick you out, you pack your bag." "But they are my family," I whispered, the old conditioning rising up to choke me. "They are not your family," Helena said sharply. "They are parasites who have attached themselves to your life. You are the host, Fiona, and today, you have the medicine to remove them." She paused. I could hear the clock ticking in her hallway through the phone line. "Fiona," she said, her voice softer now, almost a conspiratorial whisper. "If they pressure you too much, if it gets dangerous, you tell me immediately. Do you hear me?" "I hear you," I said. "I have prepared for this," she said. "I have been moving pieces on the board for a long time, child. This trust fund is just the first move. If they try to take it, they will trigger something they cannot stop." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Never mind that now," she said. "Just hold the line. Can you do that? Can you be strong for me?" I looked at the envelope on my bed. $150,000. I looked at the door where Mark was pounding, rattling the handle. "Fiona, open this door! We are not done discussing this," Mark shouted from the hallway. I wiped my eyes. I took a deep breath. Yes, I said into the phone. I can hold the line. Good, Helena said, because the real war is just starting, and I intend for us to win. She hung up. I sat on my bed, listening to Mark shout threats through the wood. He was saying I was ungrateful. He was saying I was a thief. He was saying I was useless without them. But I touched the paper of the letter. It felt real. It felt solid. For the first time in 18 years, I had something they couldn't touch. And as I listened to the pounding on the door, a strange thought crossed my mind. I wasn't trapped in here with them anymore. They were trapped out there with the version of me that was finally waking up. The money was the key, but the safe, whatever was in the safe that Grandma talked about, that was going to be the weapon. I hid the papers under the loose floorboard beneath my dresser, the one place I knew they hadn't found yet. I sat on top of it, and for the first time in my life, I didn't open the door when they told me to. I waited. I waited for them to get tired. I waited for silence. And in the silence, I started to plan. The days following my 18th birthday were not a celebration. They were a siege. The atmosphere in the house shifted from indifferent neglect to predatory focus. Before the letter from Harper and Green arrived, I was invisible, a piece of furniture that occasionally dusted itself. Now, I was the most fascinating object in the room. I was a vault that had suddenly appeared in the living room, and everyone was frantically searching for the combination. Mark did not waste time. The morning after the letter arrived, he called a family meeting. We sat around the dining table. The mahogany surface was polished to a mirror shine, my handiwork from the day before, and Mark had laid out a series of spreadsheets and graphs. He was wearing his serious business face, the one he used when he was trying to close a deal with a client who didn't know they were being ripped off. "Fiona," he began, clasping his hands together on the table. "We need to discuss the allocation of these new assets. $150,000 is a significant amount of capital. If it sits in a standard savings account, inflation will eat it alive. It is irresponsible to leave it stagnant." He slid a document toward me. It was a power of attorney form, granting Mark Perry full control over my financial decisions. "I have taken the liberty of drawing up a transfer strategy," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "We will move the bulk of the principal into the Perry Family Trust. This will allow us to leverage a lower tax bracket for capital gains. We can then allocate a portion to Dylan's tuition fund, which will count as a tax-deductible gift, and the rest will go into the high-yield tech stocks I mentioned. You will receive a monthly stipend of $200 for your personal expenses. It is a win-win." I looked at the paper. The legal jargon was dense, but the meaning was clear. Give us everything. Keep nothing. $200 a month, that was his offer. He wanted to take $150,000 and give me back the price of a few tanks of gas. "I don't want to move the money," I said. My voice was shaky, barely a whisper, but the words were there. Mark blinked. He looked at me with a mixture of amusement and irritation, like a dog that had unexpectedly barked at him. "Excuse me?" "I said I don't want to move it," I repeated, digging my fingernails into my palms under the table. "Mr. Harper said the trust is in my name. It is already managed." "Harper is an old fool," Mark snapped, his facade cracking slightly. "He has that money sitting in municipal bonds earning 2%. It is practically dead money. I can get you 10, maybe 12% returns." "But it wouldn't be my money anymore," I said. "It would be in the family trust, your trust." "And we are family," Veronica interjected. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Her skin was soft, lotion smooth, a stark contrast to my rough, chapped knuckles. "Fiona, honey, why are you being so difficult? Mark is trying to help you. Do you think you know more about finance than your father?" She called him my father. She only did that when she wanted something. "He is not my father," I said. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. Veronica's face crumpled. It was a masterful performance. Her lower lip trembled, and her eyes filled with instant, glistening tears. "How can you say that?" she whispered. "After everything we have done for you? I took you in when you were a frightened little girl. I raised you as my own. I washed your clothes. I cooked your meals. I gave you a home when you had no one. And now, the moment you get a little bit of money, you turn your back on us? You treat us like strangers? I am not turning my back, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I just want to keep the money separate, for my college. College, Dylan scoffed. He was leaning back in his chair, balancing on the rear legs, scrolling through his phone. You are barely passing math. Fiona, why do you need $100,000 for college? Just go to community college. It is like $2,000 a semester. He tossed his phone onto the table. It showed a picture of a BMW M3, deep metallic blue. Besides, Dylan said, grinning at me, I did the math, even after tuition. There is plenty left over. You buy the car for me, and I will let you drive it on weekends. I mean, if you ask nicely, and if you wash it. He wasn't joking. He genuinely believed this was a generous offer. I am not buying you a car, Dylan, I said. Why are you so selfish? Dylan snapped, the grin vanishing. You didn't even earn that money. Grandma just gave it to you. It is free money. Why shouldn't I get some? I am the one who actually needs to look good for business school. Image matters. Fiona, you are just you. Nobody cares what you drive. That is enough, Mark said, raising a hand. He looked at me, his eyes cold and hard. Fiona, take the pen. Sign the paper. We are done playing games. You are living under my roof, eating my food. As long as you are in this house, you follow the financial hierarchy. Resources are pooled. That is the rule. I need to talk to Mr. Harper first, I said, standing up. My legs felt like jelly. I have an appointment. Sit down, Mark barked. No, I said. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I expected him to grab me. I expected violence, but he was too shocked. No one had ever walked away from Mark Perry when he was giving orders. I took the bus to the law offices of Harper and Green. The office smelled of old leather and pipe tobacco, a scent that reminded me so much of the grandfather I never knew. Mr. Green was a man who looked like he had been carved out of oak. He was 80 years old, with bushy white eyebrows and hands that shook slightly when he poured water, but his mind was sharp as a razor. He listened to me recount the breakfast conversation. He didn't look surprised. Standard operating procedure for bullies, Mr. Green grunted. He opened a thick file folder on his desk. Your grandmother anticipated this. Fiona, Helena is a very wise woman. He pulled out a document. The trust is structured specifically to prevent what your stepfather is attempting. Mr. Green explained. It is an irrevocable trust. That means you cannot sign it over to them even if you wanted to. If you signed that power of attorney Mark gave you, it would be void regarding these funds because the trust bylaws explicitly forbid commingling with the Perry family assets. He looked at me over his spectacles. And there is another clause, Article 4, Section B, the duress clause. What does that mean? I asked. It means, Mr. Green said, tapping the paper, that if you report that you are being coerced, threatened, or unduly pressured to liquidate or transfer these funds, the trust empowers me to take immediate protective action. I can freeze all communication regarding the funds to anyone but you. I can even authorize an emergency disbursement of the full principal to you immediately, bypassing the age-staggered release schedule, if it is necessary for your physical removal from a hostile environment. So they can't touch it? I asked. They cannot touch a penny, Mr. Green affirmed, unless you withdraw it and hand it to them in cash, which legally you can do, but I strongly advise against it. I won't, I said. I promise. Good, Mr. Green said. Now, go home. If they ask, tell them the matter is out of your hands. Tell them the lawyers said no. Blame me. I have been hated by men like Mark Perry for 50 years. I sleep just fine. I left the office feeling lighter, but the dread returned the moment I stepped off the bus near my street. The house loomed at the end of the cul-de-sac. It looked perfect from the outside. white siding, manicured hedges, blooming hydrangeas, but inside, it was a pressure cooker. When I walked in, the silence was heavy. Mark was waiting in the living room. He wasn't with the spreadsheets anymore. He was drinking a scotch, even though it was only 4 o'clock in the afternoon. "Did you see the lawyer?" he asked without looking at me. "Yes," I said, clutching my bag strap. "He said the trust is irrevocable. I can't transfer it to the family account. It is against the bylaws." Mark swirled the amber liquid in his glass. He stood up slowly and walked toward me. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and tall. He used his size as a weapon, crowding my personal space until I had to step back against the wall. "Don't lie to me, Fiona," he said softly. "Lawyers work for the client. You are the client. You can tell them to change the bylaws. You can tell them to dissolve the trust. You just didn't want to." "I can't," I insisted. "Grandma set it up that way." "Your grandmother." Mark spat the word. "That bitter old hag is still trying to control this family from her grave. She hates me. She always has. And now she is using you to undermine my authority in my own house." He leaned in close. I could smell the alcohol on his breath. "Let me explain something to you about how the world works. Fiona, since you seem to be confused." He placed a hand on the wall next to my head, boxing me in. "Civilization was built by men. We build the houses. We pave the roads. We run the companies. We carry the weight of the world and the role of the women in the family, the daughters, the wives, is to support that mission. You are here to help the men in this family succeed. That is your purpose. When Dylan succeeds, you succeed. When I succeed, you succeed. Hoarding resources for yourself? That is unnatural. It is a betrayal of the natural order." A shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't just fear, it was revulsion. "I am not a support beam. Mark," I whispered. "I am a person." "You are a dependent," he roared, slamming his hand against the wall. The sound made me jump. "You are a leech. You have taken and taken for 18 years, and now you have the audacity to talk about being a person? You are nothing without us. Zero." Veronica appeared in the doorway. She wasn't crying anymore. Her face was tight and angry. "You are breaking his heart. Fiona," she said coldly. "Look at him. He is trying to secure a future for this family, for your brother, and you are standing there with your little secret bank account acting like a princess. It is disgusting. You are ungrateful." "I just want to go to my room," I said, trying to slide past Mark. He didn't move. "We are not done." "I am done," I said. I ducked under his arm and ran for the stairs. "If you don't sign those papers by the end of the week," Mark shouted after me, "you can start paying rent. Real rent. Market rate. $2,000 a month. Plus back pay for the last year. We will see how long that trust fund lasts then." I slammed my door and locked it. I pushed the chair under the handle again. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't unzip my jacket. My phone buzzed. A text message. "Grandma Helena, don't buckle. I can feel them squeezing. Hold the line, child. Everything is falling into place. Just don't sign." I sat on the floor, hugging my knees to my chest. I felt sick. Mark's words echoed in my head. Daughters must help the men succeed. It was so archaic, so twisted, yet he believed it with every fiber of his being. To him. I wasn't a human being with dreams of being a writer or seeing the world. I was fuel. I was something to be burned to keep Dylan warm. I looked at my desk. There was a blank notebook there, one I had stolen from the supply closet at Paper Moon. I crawled over to it. I picked up a pen. My hand was still trembling, but I forced the tip of the pen to the paper. May 13th, 2015. Mark threatened me today. He said I have to help the men succeed. He said he would charge me back rent. Veronica said I am disgusting. Dylan asked for the car again. I wrote it all down. I wrote down the time. I wrote down the exact words Mark used. I wrote down the smell of the scotch. I wrote down the look in Veronica's eyes. I didn't know why I was doing it at first. Maybe I just needed to get it out of my head. But as the pages filled with ink, I realized what I was doing. I was building a case. I wasn't just the victim in the attic anymore. I was the witness. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one, but it wouldn't be fought with shouting and slamming doors. It would be fought with dates, times, and the cold, hard truth. I wrote until my hand cramped. I wrote until the sun went down and my room filled with shadows. And for the first time, the shadows didn't scare me. They felt like cover. Downstairs, I could hear Mark pacing. I could hear the angry murmur of their voices planning their next move. Let them plan, I thought, closing the notebook and hiding it under my mattress. I have a plan too. I am going to survive you, and then I am going to ruin you. Silence is usually seen as a sign of defeat. When a prisoner stops screaming, the captor thinks they have won. When a dog stops barking, the owner thinks it is trained. For weeks, Mark and Veronica believed my silence was the white flag of surrender. They saw me nodding at their demands, keeping my head down, and moving through the house like a ghost, and they congratulated themselves on finally breaking the rebellious streak in their stepdaughter. They were wrong. My silence was not surrender. It was a helmet. It was the camouflage I wore while I dug the tunnel out of my prison. The first step of my escape plan required me to disappear, financially speaking, while still living under their roof. I knew that Mark monitored the local banks. He had friends at the main branch of Seattle Springs First National, golf buddies who would not hesitate to mention if Fiona Perry opened a checking account. So, I took a sick day from Paper Moon, my first in 2 years, and took 3 different buses to a town called Oak Creek, 40 miles away. Oak Creek was a dusty, tired town that did not have country clubs or homeowners associations. I walked into a credit union that smelled of floor wax and stale popcorn. The teller was a young woman with bright green fingernails and a bored expression. To me, she looked like an angel. "I need to open a checking account," I told her, glancing over my shoulder at the empty lobby, paranoid that Mark might somehow materialize from the potted plant. "And I need to opt out of all paper statements. Everything must be digital. No mail to my home address. Ever." "Standard procedure, honey," she said, popping her gum. "How much for the initial deposit?" I reached into my bra, where I had hidden the cash rolled up in a plastic bag. $55. It was a pathetic amount to start a new life with. It was less than what Veronica spent on her weekly manicure, but as I watched the teller count the bills, 2 20s, a 10, and 5 1s, I felt a surge of adrenaline that was almost intoxicating. This was my $55. Mark couldn't leverage it. Veronica couldn't guilt-trip it out of me. It was ghost money. From that day on, I became an expert in money laundering on a micro scale. Every time I got paid at Paper Moon, I would cash the check immediately. I would give Mark the rent he demanded, $500 a month, a number he had pulled out of thin air to punish me, and I would keep enough cash for my bus fare and basic toiletries. The rest, I would physically carry to Oak Creek on my days off, depositing $20 here, $30 there. I stopped buying lunch. I drank tap water. I walked the 3 miles home from work to save the $2.50 bus fare. I became obsessed with the accumulation of freedom. Every dollar in that secret account was a brick in the wall I was building between me and them. My second step was logistics. I needed a place to go. I couldn't afford an apartment in Seattle Springs. The rents there started at $2,000 a month for a studio. So, during my lunch breaks at Paper Moon, I sat in the back office on the computer, scrolling through Craigslist ads for the seedier parts of the county. I bought a cheap spiral notebook, black, unnoticeable, and began to catalog my options. Option A, basement suite in Oak Creek, $550, shared bathroom, no kitchen access. Option B, room in a shared house near the industrial park, $400. Landlord requires cash only. Photos look like a crime scene. Option C, studio apartment above a garage, $600, includes utilities. Owner says, no overnight guests. I wrote down every detail: square footage, distance to the nearest bus line, security deposit requirements. I analyzed them with the rigor of a military strategist. I wasn't looking for comfort. I had grown up in a house with heated floors and high thread count sheets, and I had been miserable. I would happily sleep on a mattress on a concrete floor if it meant I could lock the door and know that no one on the other side hated me. The hardest part was the communication. I knew Mark checked the phone bill. He monitored the call logs to see who I was talking to. Obsessed with the idea that I might be spreading lies about the family, I couldn't use my cell phone to call Mr. Green or my grandmother anymore. I went to a discount electronics store in the strip mall and bought a prepaid burner phone for $19. It was a plastic brick with buttons that clicked loudly, but it was untraceable. I bought a 60-minute airtime card with cash. I hid the phone in the hollow cavity behind the bottom drawer of my dresser, taped securely to the back of the wood. It was the same place Mark had found my cash years ago, but I had reinforced it. I had actually taken a screwdriver and removed the back panel of the dresser, creating a false wall. If he pulled the drawer out, he would see nothing but dust bunnies. That plastic phone became my lifeline. Every night, at 2 a.m, I would retrieve it and text Grandma Helena. Me. Account is open. Total is up to $400. Grandma. Good. Keep going. Do not let them see you sweating. But the physical evidence of my rebellion, the trust fund documents, the letters from Mr. Green, the notebook with my housing research, was becoming too dangerous to keep in the house. Veronica had a habit of cleaning my room when I was at work, which was just a euphemism for tossing my room for contraband. I brought everything to work. Darla, I said one Tuesday morning, before the rush started, can I ask you a huge favor? Darla looked up from the espresso machine. She saw the thick manila envelope in my hands. She saw the look in my eyes, the look of a trapped animal trying to chew off its own leg. She didn't ask why. That was the beautiful thing about Darla. She understood that questions were sometimes dangerous. The floor safe in the office, she said, wiping her hands on a towel. Combination is right 20, left 10, right 5, put it in the back, behind the payroll ledger. Thank you, I breathed. And Fiona? She caught my arm as I walked past. If you need to sleep on the couch in the break room, the key is under the mat. I nodded, unable to speak because of the lump in my throat. I placed the documents in the cold steel belly of the safe. As the heavy door clicked shut, I felt a physical weight lift off my shoulders. My future was no longer under Mark's roof. It was here, smelling of roasted coffee and safety. With my assets secure, I began to educate myself. I spent hours at the public library, using the computers in the far corner where the screen faced the wall. I researched the laws of the state. I typed in words that felt heavy on my fingertips: financial abuse, coercive control, domestic violence statutes. I learned that violence wasn't just a fist. I learned that what Mark and Veronica were doing, controlling my access to money, isolating me from friends, monitoring my communication, demanding my earnings, had a name. It was abuse. It was illegal. I read about restraining orders. I read about orders of protection. I printed out the forms for an immediate danger order. I filled them out in pencil, erasing them and rewriting them until I knew every line by heart. Name of respondent: Mark Perry. Relationship to petitioner: stepfather. I memorized the number for the domestic violence hotline. I didn't call it yet, but I carried the number in my head like a prayer. 1-800-799-7233. But the most crucial part of my preparation was the acting. I had to become the Fiona they wanted. I had to make them believe they had won. I started coming home 10 minutes early. I started volunteering to do the chores I hated most. I will iron Dylan's shirts for his interview, I said one evening. Veronica looked up from her magazine, surprised. You will? Yes, I said, keeping my voice flat and submissive. He needs to look professional. I want him to do well. Veronica smiled. It was a smug, terrifying smile. Finally, she said, I knew you would come around. It just took a little firm guidance. See, Mark? I told you she just needed to learn her place. Mark grunted from the sofa. About time. Don't burn the collars. I ironed those shirts with meticulous care. I imagined the steam was the smoke from the bridges I was burning. I stopped arguing about money. When Mark demanded $50 for household incidentals because the water bill was high, I didn't fight. I handed it over. It hurt. That was $50 that should have gone to the Oak Creek account. But it was the cost of doing business. It bought me their complacency. They became sloppy. They stopped whispering when they talked about their plans. "Once we get the trust fund transfer," I heard Mark say to Veronica one night while they were drinking wine on the patio, "I am going to put a down payment on that condo in Arizona. We can use it for vacations and rent it out. It will be a great tax shelter." "And we need to upgrade the kitchen," Veronica added. "These countertops are dated. Fiona can handle the renovation oversight while we are in Cabo." They were already spending my money. They were carving up my life like a Thanksgiving turkey. "Whatever you say," I whispered to myself, hidden in the shadows of the kitchen. "Keep talking." The deadline was approaching. Dylan's 22nd birthday, May 24th. The demand for the BMW had morphed from a request into an expectation. Dylan had actually stopped by the dealership. He brought home brochures. He left them on my pillow. "I want the blue one," he told me one morning, tossing a glossy pamphlet onto my toast. "With the sport package, leather seats, don't cheap out on the rims, Fiona." "I am looking into the financing," I lied. "I need to wait for the trust funds to clear the probate period." "Well, hurry up," he said. "The party is in 2 weeks. I want the keys in my hand when Dad makes the toast." "Okay," I said. "I understand." I understood perfectly. That party was the line in the sand. It was the moment the collision would happen. I knew I wasn't going to buy the car. I knew they were going to explode. And I knew that was the moment I would leave. 2 days before the party, I received a text on the burner phone. It was from Grandma Helena. "Grandma, the bank meeting is set for the Sunday after the party. 9 in the morning. Silver Oak Bank. Mr. Green will be there. I will be there. After that day, the truth will be exposed." I stared at the screen. Sunday. The party was Saturday night. That meant I had to survive Saturday night. I had to walk into that lion's den, let them attack me, and then, instead of dying, I had to walk out. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I looked at myself in the mirror. For years, the girl in the mirror had been sad. Her eyes were always red-rimmed, her shoulders hunched, her mouth downturned in perpetual apology. I looked for her now, but she was gone. The woman looking back at me was tired. Yes, her skin was pale from too much work and not enough sleep, but her eyes were different. They were dry. They were cold. They were sharp. They were the eyes of someone who was holding a match and waiting for the wind to change. "You are not a victim," I whispered to my reflection. "You are a sleeper agent, and your mission starts now." I washed my face with cold water. I brushed my hair. I unlocked the door and walked out into the hallway. "Fiona!" Veronica yelled from downstairs. "The caterers are calling about the menu. Pick up the phone." "Coming, Mother," I called back. My voice didn't shake. I walked down the stairs, one step at a time, moving toward the explosion that would finally set me free. Saturday arrived wrapped in a suffocating layer of humidity, the kind that makes your clothes stick to your skin and your temper fray at the edges. The Perry backyard had been transformed into something that did not resemble a home. It looked like a showroom. Mark had rented a white marquee tent that spanned the entire lawn, covering the manicured grass in artificial shade. There were round tables draped in heavy linen, centerpieces made of imported white orchids that cost $40 a stem, and a string quartet playing Vivaldi in the corner near the rose bushes. It was Dylan's 22nd birthday, but you would be forgiven for thinking it was a coronation. My day had started at 5 in the morning. Veronica had banged on my door before the sun was even up, handing me a clipboard with a list of tasks that ran for 3 pages. I was the event planner, the janitor, the sous chef, and the parking attendant. I had arranged the flowers. I had polished the silverware until my fingers cramped. I had directed the catering trucks up the narrow driveway. I had even ironed the napkins because Veronica decided the fold was not crisp enough. By 7 in the evening, when the first guests began to arrive, my feet felt like they were bleeding inside my sensible black flats. I was wearing a plain black dress that Veronica had selected for me. It was severe and unflattering, designed to make me blend into the background like the hired help, which effectively, I was. The guests were the elite of Seattle Springs. There were bankers, real estate moguls, members of the city council, and the parents of Dylan's friends from the country club. They drifted through the yard, clutching flutes of champagne, their laughter sounding like tinkling glass. I moved through the crowd with a silver tray of hors d'oeuvres, offering crab cakes and stuffed mushrooms. Most people didn't even look at me. They just took the food and continued their conversations, treating me as a mobile vending machine. "Wonderful party," I heard Mrs. Higgins say to Veronica near the fountain. "You have outdone yourself, darling." "Oh, it is nothing," Veronica replied, her voice dripping with false modesty. She was wearing a silk dress that shimmered like liquid gold. "We just wanted to give Dylan a send-off worthy of his potential. He is our shining star, after all." "And how is the other one?" Mrs. Higgins asked, lowering her voice slightly. "The stepdaughter?" "Fiona?" Veronica sighed, a tragic sound. "She is trying. We do our best to include her, but she prefers to stay in the shadows. Some people just don't have that spark, you know?" I walked past them, my face a mask of stone. A week ago, that comment would have made me cry in the bathroom. Today, it just fueled the cold fire burning in my chest. I caught Mark's eye across the lawn. He was holding a scotch, looking expansive and powerful as he held court with a group of men in suits. He jerked his head toward the kitchen, a silent command to bring more ice. I obeyed. I was playing the part perfectly. The obedient, beaten-down stepdaughter, the one who had finally learned her place. Dylan was the center of attention. Of course, he was wearing a tailored navy suit, his hair perfectly coiffed, holding court near the DJ booth. He looked handsome, I had to admit, but it was the handsomeness of a predator. He was laughing too loud, his eyes scanning the crowd for validation. At 8 o'clock, the sun began to set, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges. It was time. Mark walked to the center of the patio, where a small stage had been set up. He tapped a spoon against his crystal glass. The sharp ting-ting-ting cut through the chatter. The string quartet stopped playing. The crowd turned, a sea of expectant faces. "Friends, family, distinguished guests," Mark boomed, his voice projected by the microphone. "Thank you for joining us to celebrate a young man who makes me proud every single day, my son, Dylan." Applause rippled through the tent. Dylan stepped up beside Mark, grinning like he had just won the lottery. Veronica joined them, completing the holy trinity of the Perry family. I stood by the catering table, my hands clasped in front of me. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that threatened to crack my chest open. This was it, the cliff edge. "Dylan is embarking on a new journey to business school," Mark continued, placing a hand on Dylan's shoulder. "And a young man with his drive needs a vehicle that matches his ambition. Now, usually, a father buys his son a car, but in this family, we believe in shared success. We believe in siblings supporting siblings." He paused for dramatic effect. The crowd leaned in. "His sister, Fiona, has been working hard, saving her money, and she has decided to present a very special gift to her brother today, a gift that symbolizes her gratitude for this family and her faith in his future." Mark gestured to me. "Fiona, come up here." Every head turned, 200 eyes fixed on me. I felt the weight of their gaze, heavy and judging. I walked toward the stage. My legs felt wooden. The grass seemed to swallow my feet with every step. I walked up the 3 small stairs and stood next to Veronica. She was smiling, but her eyes were hard as flint. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small, black velvet box. It was a jewelry box, the kind you would put a ring in, or a key. She pressed it into my hand. Her fingers dug into my palm, a sharp, painful pinch that the audience couldn't see. "Give it to him," she hissed through her teeth, her smile never wavering. And smile. You ungrateful little wretch. I looked at the box in my hand. It felt heavy, weighted with 18 years of silence. They thought I had caved. They assumed that because I had been quiet all week, I had gone to the dealership. They assumed that inside this box was the key to a metallic blue BMW M3 parked somewhere down the street, or at least a note promising it. I looked at Dylan. He was practically vibrating with greed. He held out his hand, palm up, expecting his tribute. "Come on, sis," he said, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "Don't keep us waiting. Is it the blue one?" I looked at the crowd. I saw the neighbors who had ignored me for years. I saw the teachers who had never asked why I looked so tired in class. I saw the facade of the perfect life they all desperately wanted to believe in. I took a deep breath. I smelled the expensive perfume, the roast lamb, and the rot underneath it all. I didn't hand the box to Dylan. Instead, I lifted the lid. I held it up so everyone could see. It was empty. The velvet interior was black and void. No key, no note, no promise. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Dylan frowned, peering into the box. "What is this?" he asked, his voice losing its charm. "Where is the key?" I lowered the box. I looked straight at Mark. "There is no key," I said. My voice was not loud, but in the sudden silence of the yard, it carried... "What?" Mark said, his smile freezing in place. He chuckled nervously, trying to salvage the moment. "Fiona, stop joking around. Tell him where the car is." "I didn't buy a car," I said. I turned to the microphone, leaning in slightly so my voice boomed across the lawn, echoing off the white fences. "I am not buying a car. I am not buying anything." The gasp from the audience was audible. Veronica grabbed my arm, her nails sinking into my flesh like talons. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "Fix this, now." I pulled my arm away. The movement was sharp, violent. "I am done," I said, my voice rising, fueled by the adrenaline flooding my veins. "I am done paying for his life. I am done paying for your image. That money is mine. It was left to me by my grandmother, and I am not using my money for anyone anymore." "You bitch," Dylan said. It wasn't a whisper. He said it loudly, right into the microphone. The crowd went dead silent. The string quartet froze, bows hovering over strings. Mark stepped forward, his face turning a dark, congested shade of red. The mask of the benevolent patriarch shattered, revealing the bully underneath. He didn't care about the guests anymore. He only cared that his property was malfunctioning. "You are embarrassing this family," he growled, grabbing my shoulder and shaking me. "You are making a scene. Get off this stage." "No," I said. I planted my feet. "I am not the one who is embarrassing. You are a grown man trying to steal money from your teenage stepdaughter to buy a luxury car for your son. That is embarrassing. Mark..." That broke him. The truth was a physical blow. He reacted the only way he knew how. He swung his hand. It wasn't a theatrical slap. It was a backhand, vicious and uncontrolled. His knuckles connected with my cheekbone with a sound that was sickeningly loud, a wet, cracking sound, like a heavy glass being dropped on a tile floor. The force of it lifted me off my feet. I spun around and crashed onto the wooden stage floor. My head hit the planks with a dull thud. For a second, the world went white. My ears rang with a high-pitched scream. Then I realized the scream wasn't in my head. It was the guests. "Oh my God," someone yelled. I tried to push myself up, blood dripping from my nose onto the pristine white wood of the stage. But before I could rise, Veronica was on me. She didn't help me up. She grabbed a handful of my hair and yanked my head back, slamming me down again. "You ungrateful little monster!" she shrieked, her face contorted into a mask of pure hatred. "After everything we did, you ruin everything. You are useless, useless." She was shaking me, her jewelry scratching my face. "Hold her down," Mark roared. And then Dylan was there. My brother, the boy I had cooked for, cleaned for, lied for. He grabbed my arm, the one I was using to shield my face, and squeezed. He squeezed so hard I felt the tendons grinding together. "You ruined my birthday!" he yelled, spitting in my face. "You stupid, selfish bitch!" It was a frenzy, a 3-person assault in front of 100 witnesses. They had forgotten where they were. The rage of being told no had stripped away every layer of civilization they possessed. "Get off her!" a male voice bellowed from the crowd. "Call 911!" a woman screamed. "Call the police! He is killing her!" I was dizzy. The world was spinning in a sickening kaleidoscope of colors. I saw the flashing lights of the strobe from the DJ booth. I saw the white orchids toppled over. I looked past Dylan's shoulder. Standing near the buffet table, the neighbors, the Joneses, the Millers, were not looking away. They had their phones out. The little black eyes of the camera lenses were pointed right at us. The red recording lights were blinking. They were filming. They were filming Mark standing over me with a raised fist. They were filming Veronica screaming obscenities while pulling my hair. They were filming Dylan pinning his sister to the ground because he didn't get a BMW. I felt a strange, detached sense of victory. Got you, I thought. The pain in my head flared, a blinding white supernova. I stopped fighting. I let my body go limp on the stage. "She is passed out," someone yelled. I heard sirens, distant at first, then closer, whooping, wailing sirens that sounded like justice. I looked up one last time before the darkness took me. I saw Mark's face. He had stopped moving. He was looking at the crowd. He saw the phones. He saw the horror on the faces of his business partners. He saw the social standing he had spent 20 years building evaporate in 10 seconds. His face went pale, a ghostly, terrified white. Veronica let go of my hair, her hands trembling. She looked around, blinking, as if waking up from a trance. The red and blue lights of the ambulance washed over the backyard, cutting through the twilight. They illuminated the scene like a crime drama. I closed my eyes. The stage was hard against my back, but it didn't matter. I wasn't going to be carrying the weight anymore. I let the darkness pull me down, knowing that when I woke up, the world would be a very different place. The hospital room was blindingly white. It was not the warm, fuzzy white of a cloud, but the sharp, antiseptic white of a place designed to expose everything. There were no shadows here for secrets to hide in. I was sitting on the edge of a gurney, my legs dangling in a paper gown that smelled of starch and disinfectant. A doctor, a man with kind eyes and tired shoulders named Dr. Evans, was stitching the cut above my hairline. Every time the needle tugged, I felt a pinch, but it was distant, as if my body belonged to someone else. 3 stitches, Dr. Evans said. Tying off the knot with practiced efficiency, he peeled off his latex gloves and dropped them into the biohazard bin. The snap of the rubber sounded like a period at the end of a sentence. "You have a mild concussion, Fiona, and significant bruising on your left zygomatic arch. That is your cheekbone, plus some scalp trauma where your hair was pulled." He picked up a camera. "I need to document these injuries for the police report. Is that okay?" "Yes," I said. My voice sounded rusty. He took the photos. Click. The bruise on my face. Click. The bald patch on my scalp where Veronica had ripped a handful of hair out. Click. The fingerprints bruising my upper arm where Dylan had pinned me. They were not just injuries. They were a map of my childhood. Finally, someone was reading the legend. After the doctor left, a woman walked in. She was wearing a navy blue blazer and holding a clipboard. She introduced herself as Mrs. Patterson, a hospital social worker. She didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with professional determination. "Fiona," she said, pulling a chair close to the bed. "The police are outside. Officer Sergio wants to take your statement. But before he comes in, I need to tell you something. You are 27 years old. You are an adult. You do not have to protect anyone. What happens in this room determines what happens next. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said. "Good," she said. She signaled to the door. Officer Sergio walked in. He was a large man, taking up a lot of space in the small room, but his demeanor was gentle. He had a notepad in his hand and a body camera strapped to his chest. "Ms. Perry," he said, nodding respectfully. "I am Officer Sergio. I responded to the call at your residence." He flipped open his notepad. "We have multiple witness statements," he began, his voice low and serious. "And we have video evidence. 3 different neighbors provided cell phone footage of the incident. I have viewed it myself." I closed my eyes. I could see it in my mind. Mark's hand, Veronica's rage, the toppled orchids. "I need you to tell me, in your own words, what happened." Sergio said, "Start from the moment you went on stage." I took a deep breath. For 20 years, I had been trained to edit my reality. Don't tell the teachers. Don't tell the neighbors. Smile. I looked at the white walls. I looked at the hospital bracelet on my wrist. Fiona Perry. "It started with a car," I said. "They wanted me to buy a BMW for my brother, an $80,000 car. I refused. I told him everything. I told him about the empty box. I told him about the slap, how it felt like a hammer. I told him about Veronica grabbing my hair and screaming that I was useless. I told him about Dylan holding me down while I bled on the white stage floor. I didn't embellish. I didn't cry. I just laid the facts out on the table like cold stones." Officer Sergio wrote everything down. His pen scratched against the paper, a rhythmic, comforting sound. "Did you feel that your life was in danger?" he asked. I thought about Dylan's hands on my arms. I thought about the look in Mark's eyes, a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. "Yes," I said. "If the neighbors hadn't been there, if they hadn't been filming, they wouldn't have stopped." Sergio nodded grimly. "That matches our assessment." My phone, which Mrs. Patterson had placed on the side table, buzzed. Then it buzzed again, and again, a rapid-fire assault of vibrations. I looked at the screen. Mom calling, Dad calling, Dylan calling. The names flashed like warning lights. "They are trying to reach me," I whispered, panic rising in my throat like bile. Mrs. Patterson reached over and picked up the phone. She didn't answer it. She held it up. "Block them," she said firmly. "Right now. Do not listen to their voicemails. Do not read their texts. They are going to try to gaslight you. They are going to apologize, then threaten, then beg. It is a cycle. Fiona, break it." My finger hovered over the screen. Blocking Mark Perry felt like trying to stop a tidal wave with a paper shield. He was the authority. He was the law. But he wasn't here. I was here. I pressed block caller, then Veronica, then Dylan. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. "Good," Officer Sergio said. "We are issuing a temporary emergency protective order. They cannot come within 500 feet of you. They cannot contact you directly or through a third party. If they try, they go to jail, immediately." A knock at the door interrupted us. A man in a gray wool suit stepped in. Looking out of place in the sterile neon of the ER, he was carrying a leather briefcase that looked older than I was. "Mr. Green," I breathed. My grandmother's lawyer looked at me, and his stony face softened just a fraction. He walked over to the bed, ignoring the police officer and the social worker, and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I heard," he said. "Your grandmother called me. She said the neighbors were posting videos on Facebook." He placed his briefcase on the rolling table and snapped the latches open. "I am here as your legal counsel," he told Officer Sergio, who nodded and stepped back. Mr. Green pulled out a file. It was the trust fund document. "Fiona," he said, his voice crisp and businesslike. "Article 4, Section B, the duress clause. We discussed this." "Yes," I said. "The events of tonight constitute a verified threat to your physical safety and well-being," Mr. Green stated. "I have witnessed the police report being taken. I have seen the injuries. Under the terms of the Helena Perry Trust, this triggers an immediate release of all assets to your sole control to ensure your ability to relocate and secure safety." He pulled a fountain pen from his pocket and uncapped it. "You do not need to wait for the bank meeting. You do not need to wait for probate. You sign this, and the money is yours. Tonight, $150,000, plus the accrued interest. I looked at the paper. It was just a piece of paper, but it looked like a wingsuit. What about them? I asked. Can they stop it? They are currently busy explaining to the police why they assaulted a young woman in front of the entire Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Green said with a dry satisfaction. They have no say in this. This is your money, Fiona. It always has been. I took the pen. My hand was wrapped in gauze where I had scraped it on the stage, but I gripped the pen tight. I signed my name, Fiona Perry. Mr. Green blew on the ink to dry it. Done. I will wire the funds to your account in Oak Creek first thing Monday morning. In the meantime, I have authorized a cash advance from the firm for your immediate needs. He handed me a thick white envelope. There is $2,000 in cash in there, for a hotel, for clothes, for whatever you need. My phone buzzed again, not a call this time, a text on the burner phone, the one I had kept hidden in my bra even through the ambulance ride. I pulled it out. Grandma Helena, meet me at the bank on Sunday, 9 o'clock. Bring the lawyer. It is my turn now. I looked at Mr. Green. Grandma says she still wants the meeting on Sunday. Mr. Green smiled, a rare shark-like expression. Oh, we will be there. Helena has been waiting 20 years to drop the other shoe. I wouldn't miss it for the world. An hour later, I was discharged. I didn't go home. I couldn't go home. Officer Sergio drove me in his patrol car to a motel on the edge of town. The Starlight Inn. It wasn't fancy. The neon sign flickered, and the paint was peeling, but to me, it looked like a fortress. We have a unit patrolling this area tonight, Sergio told me as he handed me my bag, a plastic hospital bag containing my ruined dress and my shoes. If you see them, if you even think you see them, you call 911. Do not hesitate. I won't, I said. I walked into the motel room. It smelled of lemon polish and stale cigarettes. I locked the deadbolt. I put the chain on. I wedged a chair under the handle. I sat on the edge of the bed. I was wearing a pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt that Mrs. Patterson had found for me from the hospital donation bin. I felt strange. I felt light. I reached into the envelope Mr. Green had given me. I pulled out the stack of bills. $2,000. More money than I had ever held in my hand at one time. I laid it out on the bedspread. I wasn't poor. I wasn't dependent. I wasn't the stepdaughter who needed to beg for gas money. I was Fiona Perry. I had $150,000 coming. I had a lawyer. I had the police on my side. I picked up the burner phone and texted Grandma back. Me. I am safe. I signed the papers. I am out. Her reply came instantly. Grandma. Good. Sleep well. My brave girl. You survived the fire. Now, we clear the ashes. Sunday morning, we open the safe. I stared at the words. Open the safe. I lay back on the lumpy mattress. My head throbbed where the stitches were. My cheek burned. My scalp ached. But for the first time in 27 years, I fell asleep without listening for footsteps in the hallway. The silence in the motel room wasn't empty. It was full of promise. Information travels faster than light in Seattle Springs. Light has to obey the laws of physics, but gossip only has to obey the laws of malice. And nothing, absolutely nothing, is more delicious to a town obsessed with perfection than watching the perfect family implode in high definition. I spent the next 48 hours in the Starlight Inn, watching my life dismantle itself on the screen of my laptop. The video of the slap had gone viral, not just local viral, but national viral. Someone had uploaded it to Twitter with the hashtag #ToxicFamily, and by Monday morning, it had 3 million views. It was strange to watch it. It felt like watching a movie about someone else. I saw the girl in the black dress, me, standing on the stage. I saw the empty box. I heard my voice, clear and steady, saying I was done. And then I saw the violence. On screen, it looked even worse than it felt. You could see the sheer animal rage in Mark's face. You could see the way Veronica's features twisted into something demonic. You could see Dylan's smirk vanish as he grabbed me. The comment section was a bloodbath. I know these people. One user wrote, "They go to my church. They always act so holy. But the stepdaughter always looked like she was afraid to breathe." That is Mark Perry. Another wrote, "He is a VP at Sterling Partners. Does his company know he beats women?" They did know. By Monday afternoon, the press release was out. Sterling Partners issued a statement saying they were deeply disturbed by the footage and were placing Mark Perry on indefinite unpaid suspension, pending a full ethics investigation. In the corporate world, that was code for, "You are dead to us." I knew Mark. His identity was entirely wrapped up in his job title. Being suspended was not just a financial hit, it was a castration. Veronica was next. She was the chairwoman of the Autumn Charity Gala, the most prestigious social event of the season. It was her crown jewel. She had spent 6 months planning the centerpieces alone. On Tuesday, I received an email from a friend of Darla's who was on the committee. She forwarded me the internal memo. Due to recent distressing events that contradict the values of our organization, the board has voted to remove Mrs. Veronica Perry from her leadership position, effective immediately. I imagined Veronica reading that email in her designer kitchen. I imagined her screaming. She cared more about that gala than she cared about me, or Dylan, or even Mark. Being uninvited from her own party was a social death sentence. And then there was Dylan, my brother, the golden boy. The business school he had been accepted to, the one he needed the BMW to impress, had a strict code of conduct. Scholarship recipients were expected to be leaders of exemplary character. Assaulting your sister on camera because she didn't buy you a luxury car did not fit the definition of exemplary character. The rejection letter was apparently swift and brutal. He lost his spot. He lost the scholarship. He was stuck in Seattle Springs, a prince without a kingdom, driving his old car that he despised so much. But the most fascinating part was the reaction of the neighbors. For 20 years, these people had watched me mow the lawn while Dylan played video games. They had watched me carry the groceries while Veronica walked ahead empty-handed. They had seen me wearing threadbare coats while Dylan wore North Face jackets. They had seen it, and they had said nothing. They had smiled and waved and complimented Veronica on her parenting. Now, suddenly, they were all experts on my suffering. Officer Sergio called me on Wednesday to give me an update. "You would not believe the calls we are getting. Fiona," he said, his voice sounding tired but satisfied. "Mrs. Gable down the street called to report that she saw Mark screaming at you in the driveway 3 years ago. Mr. Henderson said he remembers you cleaning the gutters in the rain when you were 12. Suddenly, everyone wants to be a witness. They are trying to clear their own consciences. I think—" "Let them," I said. "I don't care why they are talking. I just care that they are not silent anymore." I was done with the motel. With the cash advance from Mr. Green, I rented a small studio apartment on the north side of town. It was tiny, 400 square feet, and the view was of a brick wall, but it was mine. I went to a thrift store and bought my own furniture, a mattress, a wooden table, 2 chairs, a set of blue plates because Veronica hated blue. The first night I spent there, I sat on the floor eating takeout noodles with plastic chopsticks. The apartment was silent. There was no television blaring Mark's golf games. There was no Veronica criticizing my posture. There was no Dylan demanding snacks. It was the loudest silence I had ever heard. It rang with the sound of freedom. I kept my appointment with Dr. Rowan, my therapist. I had been seeing her in secret for 6 months, paying her in cash for my tips. She was a small, fierce woman who had been telling me for months that I needed to leave. When I walked into her office on Thursday, she didn't say anything. She just stood up and hugged me. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it." "I did," I said. I sat down on her couch, the couch where I had cried so many times about being trapped, and I felt different. I feel angry. Dr. Rowan, I thought I would feel relieved, but I just feel angry that they got away with it for so long. "Anger is good," Dr. Rowan said, nodding. "Anger is fuel. You spent 20 years turning that anger inward, hurting yourself. Now you are turning it outward, where it belongs. You are incinerating the structures that held you captive. Let it burn. Darla at Paper Moon was less philosophical and more practical. When I walked in for my shift on Friday, the entire staff stopped what they were doing. "There she is," Darla shouted. "The Dragon Slayer!" She came out from behind the counter and lifted me off my feet. "I saw the video. Kid, I saw you stand up to him. I have never been prouder of anyone in my life. You have free coffee for the rest of eternity." The customers, regulars who knew me as the quiet girl who remembered their orders, clapped. It was surreal. I wasn't the invisible Fiona anymore. I was a symbol. But the war wasn't over. There was one final battle left. Grandma Helena. She had been quiet all week. I knew she was moving pieces on the board, preparing for Sunday. On Friday afternoon, I received a notification from Mr. Green. Meeting confirmed. Sunday, May 26th, 9 o'clock in the morning. Silver Oak Bank, private vault room. Attendance is mandatory for Mark, Veronica, and Dylan Perry, as per the stipulations of the original family trust. I called Mr. Green immediately. "How did you get them to agree?" I asked. "There is a restraining order. They can't be in the same room as me." "We made an exception for legal proceedings," Mr. Green explained, his voice dry. "And they didn't agree. Fiona, they were summoned. The terms of your grandfather's original will, the one Mark thinks he controls, have a clause. If the matriarch calls a formal audit of the family assets, all beneficiaries must be present or they forfeit their claim. Mark is terrified you are going to cut him off. He thinks this meeting is a negotiation. He thinks he can still bully his way into a settlement." "He is wrong," I said. "He is very wrong," Mr. Green agreed. "Helena has arrived in town. She is staying at the Four Seasons. She is ready." Saturday was a blur of nerves. I cleaned my tiny apartment 3 times. I walked around the block until my legs ached. I kept thinking about the safe. What could be in it? Grandma had said she was preparing. She had said she had evidence. I thought about the years of gaslighting, the way Mark would steal my money and tell me I was selfish, the way Veronica would insult me and tell me she was doing it for my own good. They had erased my reality. They had rewritten history every single day to make themselves the heroes and me the villain. But a safe contains things that cannot be rewritten. Hard copies, proof. Saturday night, I lay in my new bed, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "We know you are scared. Just sign the money over and we can go back to being a family. We forgive you." It was Dylan. He must have used a friend's phone. "We forgive you." The audacity was breathtaking. After beating me, after stealing from me, after humiliating me, he was offering me forgiveness, as if I were the one who had sinned. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot of the text and emailed it to Officer Sergio. Violation of protective order. I typed in the subject line. I wasn't playing their game anymore. I was playing by the rules of the law. Sunday morning dawned gray and rainy. Typical Seattle weather. I dressed carefully. I didn't wear the drab clothes Veronica used to pick for me. I wore a pair of tailored black trousers I had bought with my own money, a crisp white shirt, and a blazer I had found at a vintage store. I looked like a businesswoman. I looked like an adult. I took a taxi to Silver Oak Bank. It was a massive stone building downtown, a fortress of old money. Mr. Green was waiting for me in the lobby. He looked impeccable in his gray suit. Beside him sat Grandma Helena in a wheelchair. She looked frail. Her skin was translucent, like parchment paper. But her eyes? Her eyes were burning with a blue fire that could weld steel. She was wearing a hat with a small veil and a string of pearls that looked like they weighed more than she did. "Grandma," I said, rushing over to her. She reached out and gripped my hand. Her hand was cold, but her grip was iron. "Look at you," she rasped, looking me up and down. "You look like a soldier. Are you ready?" "I am ready," I said. "Good," she said. "Push me. I want to make an entrance." We took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The doors slid open to reveal the private banking suite. It was a room of mahogany and leather, smelling of money and silence. They were already there. Mark sat on one side of the long conference table. He looked terrible. His skin was gray, his eyes bloodshot. He hadn't shaved in 2 days. The suspension and the public shaming had aged him 10 years in a week. Veronica sat next to him, looking brittle. Her makeup was heavy, trying to hide the stress lines, but it was cracking. She was wearing sunglasses indoors, hiding her eyes. Dylan sat at the end of the table, slouching. He looked sullen, like a child in time out. He had a bandage on his hand, probably from punching a wall after he lost his scholarship. When we wheeled in, Mark stood up. "Mother," he said, his voice tight, "this is ridiculous. Dragging us down here on a Sunday." "Sit down, Mark," Helena said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cracked through the room like a whip. Mark sat. "We are not here to chat," Helena said. "We are here to open the archives." She gestured to the bank manager, a solemn man in a black suit who was standing by a large steel cart. On the cart sat a metal safety deposit box. It was old, battered, and locked. "Box number 402, the manager announced. "Registered to Helena Perry." Mark rolled his eyes. "What is in there, Mom? Your old jewelry? We don't need your pearls. We need to discuss Fiona's erratic behavior and the return of the family assets she stole." "Stole?" I said. "It is my trust fund." "It is family capital," Mark shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Strike one," Mr. Green said calmly, looking at his watch. "Keep raising your voice, Mark, and I will have security remove you." Mark glared at him, but he shut his mouth. "Open it," Helena commanded. The manager inserted a long brass key into the lock. He turned it. The mechanism clicked with a heavy, final sound. He lifted the lid. The room went silent. Mark leaned forward, expecting gold, or diamonds, or bonds. It was paper, stacks and stacks of paper. Helena reached in with a shaking hand. She pulled out a thick bundle tied with red string. "Do you know what this is, Mark?" she asked. Mark frowned. "It looks like trash." "It is a record," Helena said. 20 years of records." She tossed the bundle onto the table. It slid across the mahogany surface and stopped in front of him. "Open it." Mark hesitated. He looked at Veronica, who was gnawing on her lip. He reached out and untied the string. He picked up the top sheet. His face went pale. "This is—" he stammered. "How did you get this?" "I have friends everywhere," Helena said. "I have had eyes in your house since the day my son died." I leaned forward. "What is it?" Helena looked at me, and her expression softened. "It is the truth, Fiona. It is every email Veronica sent to her friends calling you a burden. It is every bank transfer Mark made from your father's life insurance policy, money that was supposed to be for you, into his own failing investments. It is the transcripts of the voicemails you left me crying when you were 10 years old." She pulled out another stack. "And this," she said, her voice turning hard as diamond, "is the medical report from when you fell down the stairs when you were 14, the one Mark bribed the doctor to falsify. I found the nurse who was on duty. She gave a sworn affidavit." Mark dropped the paper as if it were burning him. Veronica let out a small, strangled sob. "You were building a case," I whispered. "I was building a coffin," Helena corrected, "for their reputation, for their greed." She wheeled herself closer to the table. "You thought I was a senile old woman," she hissed at Mark. "You thought I was just watching TV in my bungalow, but I was watching you. I was counting every dollar you stole from this girl. I was documenting every bruise." She looked at Mr. Green. "Read the new will." Mr. Green opened a leather folder. "As of this morning," he read, "Helena Perry has restructured her entire estate, the Perry Family Trust, which Mark Perry has been managing in anticipation of inheritance, is dissolved." Mark looked like he had been shot. "You can't do that." "I just did," Helena said. "The house you live in? It is in my name. I let you live there rent-free because I wanted to keep Fiona close. But now? Mr. Green continued, Mark and Veronica Perry are hereby served with an eviction notice. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. 30 days? Veronica shrieked. Where are we supposed to go? I don't know, Helena said coolly. Maybe you can live in that BMW you wanted so badly. Oh, wait, you didn't get that either. I looked at them. I looked at the fear in their eyes. The arrogance was gone. The mask was gone. They were just three small, mean people who had lost their power. And the assets? Mark whispered. The investments? Everything, Helena said, looking at me with fierce pride. Everything goes to Fiona. The house, the stocks, the savings, all of it. It is reparation. For 18 years of servitude. She pointed a finger at Dylan. And you, she said, you are young enough to learn. You want money? Get a job? You want a car? Take the bus. Welcome to the real world, boy. The silence in the room was absolute. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the frantic beating of my own heart. I stood up. I walked over to the table. I picked up the stack of papers. The proof of my suffering. The proof of their crimes. I looked at Mark. He couldn't even meet my eyes. He was staring at his hands, defeated. I am not going to be like you, I said softly. I am not going to destroy you for sport, but I am going to take what is mine. I looked at Veronica. You said I was useless, but it turns out I was the only thing holding this family together, and now that I am gone, you are falling apart. I turned to Grandma Helena. Let's go. Mr. Green began to pack up the documents. The bank manager closed the safe. We walked out. I pushed Grandma's wheelchair, my head held high. We left them sitting there in the expensive leather chairs, surrounded by the debris of their lies. We left them to the silence they had tried to force on me for so long. I pushed the elevator button. The doors slid open. As we descended to the lobby, I opened my laptop bag to put the papers inside. I saw my reflection in the dark screen. My eyes were bright. My hands were steady. Are you okay? Grandma asked, looking up at me. I closed the laptop with a click. Lately, I whispered, I have been shaking for 20 years. But this time, I'm not shaking. The conference room on the third floor of Silver Oak Bank was designed to intimidate. It was a cavernous space of polished mahogany, floor-to-ceiling glass, and air conditioning that was set to a temperature I could only describe as cryogenic. The light that filtered in from the gray Seattle sky was cold and unforgiving, casting long, sharp shadows across the table. I sat on the left side of the table. Next to me was Mr. Green, who had arranged his legal pads and fountain pens with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation. On the right side sat the Perry family. They looked like a painting that had been left out in the rain. Mark was slumped in his chair, his expensive suit rumpled, the dark circles under his eyes speaking of sleepless nights and lawyer consultations. Veronica sat rigidly upright, clutching her handbag as if it contained the last vestiges of her dignity. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, likely to hide the puffiness of eyes that had been crying over lost social status. Dylan was at the far end, slouching, picking at the bandage on his hand, radiating a sullen, teenage energy that seemed pathetic on a 22-year-old man. The door opened with a soft hydraulic hiss. My grandmother, Helena Perry, entered the room. She was not walking. She was being pushed in her wheelchair by a stern-faced bank security officer. She was dressed in a charcoal gray suit that looked like it was tailored in the 1950s, elegant and severe. On her lap, she held a small black leather clutch. She did not look at Mark. She did not look at Veronica. Her eyes, sharp and blue as glacial ice, locked onto mine. She gave me a microscopic nod. It was a signal. The cavalry has arrived. The bank manager, Mr. Sterling, followed her in. He was pushing a heavy steel cart. On the cart sat a safety deposit box. It was large, gray, and looked heavy enough to crush bone. Good morning, Mr. Sterling said, his voice professional and neutral. We are here to execute the audit and restructuring of the Perry Family Trust assets, as requested by the primary grantor, Mrs. Helena Perry. Mark cleared his throat. It sounded like grinding gears. This is unnecessary, he said, his voice raspy. Mother, we can handle this at home. There is no need to involve the bank in a family dispute. There is no home to go back to. Mark, Helena said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that silenced the room instantly. And this is not a dispute. This is a reckoning. She turned to Mr. Sterling. Open it. I need the code, Mrs. Perry, Mr. Sterling said. Helena leaned forward. Her arthritic fingers hovered over the keypad on the box's lid. She typed in 4 numbers. 0, 5, 1, 2. My birthday, May 12th. The lock clicked with a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. Mr. Sterling lifted the heavy steel lid. Mark leaned forward, his eyes greedy and anxious. I knew what he was expecting. He was expecting bearer bonds. He was expecting gold coins. He was expecting the physical wealth he had been salivating over for 20 years. Mr. Sterling reached into the box and pulled out the first stack. It was paper, just paper. What is this? Veronica whispered, her voice trembling. This, Helena said, is the receipt. Mr. Sterling began to lay the documents out on the table. He arranged them in neat rows, like evidence at a murder trial. There were bank statements dating back 18 years. There were emails printed on crisp white paper. There were photographs. There were affidavits. Item 1, Mr. Green said, picking up a document. A sworn affidavit from Dr. Aris, the pediatrician who treated Fiona when she was 10. Mark Perry told the doctor she fell off her bike. The doctor noted in his private files that the bruising pattern was consistent with a hand-shaped grip on the upper arm. He was pressured to change the official report by Mark, who threatened to sue the practice. Mark went white. That is a lie. The doctor is lying. We have the original notes, Mr. Green said calmly, placing the paper down. Item 2, financial records, monthly transfers from the household account, money designated for Fiona's childcare and clothing, diverted to a private account in the Cayman Islands under the name Perry Ventures. Total diverted funds over 15 years, $240,000. Veronica gasped. She turned to Mark. You said those investments were for the college fund. Shut up, Veronica, Mark hissed. And speaking of you, Veronica, Helena said. She pointed a shaking finger at a stack of printed emails. Mr. Sterling, read the highlighted section. The bank manager picked up a sheet of paper. He adjusted his glasses. Email from Veronica Perry to Society Ladies of Seattle Group, dated November 4th, 2012. Subject, The Burden. He cleared his throat and read aloud. I don't know what to do with her. Fiona is absolutely useless. She walks around the house like a ghost. I honestly wish Mark would just send her to a boarding school or let her run away. She ruins the aesthetic of the family. At least Dylan has potential. I'm just counting the days until she is 18 and we can legally kick her out without the neighbors talking. The silence that followed was suffocating. I looked at Veronica. Her face had drained of all color. She wasn't wearing her mask of the loving mother anymore. She was exposed as the cruel, superficial woman she was. I didn't mean that, she stammered, her voice thin and reedy. I was just venting. It was a bad day. You sent 40 emails like that over 6 years, Helena said. I have them all. You called my granddaughter useless. You called her a burden. You called her a mistake. Helena's hands gripped the armrests of her wheelchair. But my favorite piece of evidence, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous growl, is this. She pulled a small digital recorder from her clutch. It was old, scratched, and taped together. You thought I was asleep. Mark, she said. Christmas Eve, 2014. You and Veronica were in the kitchen. I was in the living room, dozing in my chair, or so you thought. She pressed the play button. The audio was grainy, but the voices were unmistakable. Mark's voice. Don't worry about the old bat. She will be dead soon. And once she is gone, we get the house, we get the trust, and we can cut Fiona loose. The girl is too stupid to fight back. She will never know what hit her. She is too scared of her own shadow to challenge me. Veronica's voice. Just make sure the will is airtight. Mark, I don't want her getting a penny. We need that money for the beach house. Mark's voice. She won't dare fight back. Mom, she is weak. Helena pressed stop. The recording ended, leaving the echo of Mark's cruelty hanging in the air. She won't dare fight back. Mark was staring at the recorder as if it were a bomb. He looked small. He looked like a man who realized the walls were not just closing in, but were crushing him. I wasn't asleep, Helena said softly, and she isn't weak. She pushed the recorder toward him. I stayed silent for too long, Helena said, her voice gaining strength with every word. I watched you chip away at her soul. I watched you treat her like a servant in her own home. I thought if I intervened too soon, you would just find another way to hurt her. So I waited. I waited until you made a mistake. I waited until you got greedy. She signaled to Mr. Green. The will, she commanded. Mr. Green opened a blue folder. This is the last will and testament of Helena Perry, updated and notarized as of this morning. Mr. Green announced. It supersedes all previous documents. He looked at Mark over his spectacles. The property located at 42 Maple Drive, the house you are currently residing in, is the sole property of Helena Perry. The rent you have been paying was not a mortgage payment, it was a lease, and that lease is hereby terminated for cause. You can't evict us, Mark whispered. We have rights. You have 30 days, Mr. Green corrected. After that, the sheriff will remove you. Furthermore, Mr. Green continued, the entirety of the Perry family estate, including the investment portfolio, the jewelry collection, and the liquid assets previously held in the joint trust, is hereby transferred to the sole beneficiary, Ms. Fiona Perry. I gasped. I looked at Grandma. All of it? I asked. All of it, Helena said. It was your grandfather's money. He built it. Mark didn't earn a dime of it. He just managed it. Badly. But what about me? Dylan spoke up. He sounded like a child who had dropped his ice cream. I am a beneficiary too. I am family. You can't just cut me out. He looked at me, his eyes wide and pleading. He tried to summon that old charm, the one he used to get extra dessert or money for video games. Fiona, come on, he said, leaning over the table. We are siblings. You know I didn't mean to hurt you at the party. I was just stressed. Dad pressured me. I am a victim here too. You can't let them leave me with nothing. I need that money for my startup. It was pathetic. It was a performance so transparent I wondered how I had ever been intimidated by him. You are not a victim, Dylan, I said. My voice was steady. You are an accomplice. But I am your brother, he whined. No, Helena cut in. You are a leech that has been feeding on your sister's kindness for 20 years. Helena turned her wheelchair to face the three of them. You called her useless, she said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. You called her a burden, but look at the papers on this table. Who kept the house clean? Fiona? Who cooked the meals? Fiona. Who saved her money while you spent yours on cars and parties? Fiona. She slammed her hand on the table. The person who is useless is not Fiona. It is the adults in this room who failed to protect a child because they were too busy loving themselves. It is you, Mark. It is you, Veronica. You are the useless ones. You are the failures. The room seemed to shrink around them. Mark had his head in his hands. Veronica was weeping silently behind her sunglasses. Dylan was staring at the table, realizing his free ride was over. I looked at them. I looked at the people who had defined my world for so long. They looked so small. They were not monsters. They were just sad, greedy, empty people. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. Miss Green, I said. Yes, Fiona? Do they have to sign the non-interference agreement? Yes, Mr. Green said. If they want to avoid criminal prosecution for fraud and embezzlement regarding the misappropriated funds, they must sign a binding agreement never to contact you, never to come within 1,000 feet of you, and never to make a claim on the estate. I looked at Mark. Sign it, I said. Mark looked up. His eyes were dull. The fire was gone. He reached for the pen. His hand shook as he scribbled his name. Mark Perry. He slid the paper to Veronica. She signed it, a sob escaping her lips as she realized her social life, her house, her money. It was all gone. Dylan signed last. He didn't look at me. I don't belong to this family anymore, I said. It wasn't an angry declaration. It was a statement of fact, like saying the sky is gray. I am returning your name. I am keeping my grandmother's name, but I am leaving yours behind. I picked up the papers, the evidence, the new will, the freedom. Grandma? I said. Yes, dear? Let's go get some lunch. I am paying. Helena smiled. It was a genuine, brilliant smile that lit up her tired face. I would love that, she said. I walked around the table. I took the handles of her wheelchair. I didn't look back at Mark, or Veronica, or Dylan. They were part of the past now, fading into the background like bad actors in a play that had been canceled. I pushed the wheelchair toward the door. Mr. Green held it open for us. As we stepped out of the conference room and into the hallway, the air felt different. It wasn't cold anymore. It felt fresh. It felt like the future. We walked to the elevator. The doors opened. We stepped inside. As the doors closed, shutting out the sight of the Silver Oak Bank conference room forever, I looked at my reflection in the mirrored wall. I saw a woman who had been broken, beaten, and erased, but I also saw a woman who had taped herself back together. I looked down at Grandma Helena. She patted my hand. We won, she whispered. Yes, I said. We won. 2 generations of women, the old one who had held the line, and the young one who had finally crossed it. We exited the bank into the drizzle of Seattle, but to me, it didn't feel like rain. It felt like a baptism. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the damp, cool air. I was homeless, in a way. I had no parents. I had no brother. But I had myself, and for the first time in my life, that was enough. I looked at the camera, at the invisible audience that had been following this journey. You don't break a family when you save yourself, I said, my voice firm and clear. The family was broken a long time ago when they decided to treat you like an asset instead of a human being. Walking away isn't destruction, it is survival. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe relaxing before bed? Please drop a comment below and let me know your location so we can connect. And if you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it.